All right. Okay. So good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. We're going to start the meeting at 6 p.m. Secretary, please take the roll.
Thank you, Madam President. Student Trustee Casares. Here. Trustee Medina Diaz, Area 1. Present. Trustee Santana, Area 2. Trustee Lomelli, Area 3.
Present.
Trustee Orozco, Area 4.
Present.
Trustee Valladares, Area 5. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Are we doing next? Yes. So, Trustee Medina Diaz. Sorry, I know I'm so sorry to lead us in the. All right. Absolutely sorry.
Place the right hand over.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you for that. Is there any public comment? No, none, seeing none, any comments? Okay. So we will go ahead and start our study session on AB 705 and AB 1705. Dr. Flores, I will refer to you. Thank you.
So first of all, I want to thank everybody who's here because you can see the board. I want to demonstrate to the board how much work was put into the study session. And so really we're going to be able to provide you a holistic overview of everything that Rio Hondo College has done from the inception of the legislation to where we're currently at. I know that this is something that is not only a board goal, but has been also one of my goals to really look at what are we doing, what do we need to do better, and how we can move the needle, and what resources do we need to invest in order to increase our success in our transferable courses. So this is what the agenda looks like. I was joking around that so we're having a 3-hour show, but the reality is that we have about 2 hours and 20 minutes, like let's say, of content that each of the presenters here will be going over. We left about a 40-minute cushion, which I think is a lot, so hopefully we won't be here for 3 hours. I do want to say, though, that if we can, at the end of each section that you'll see of these items, if we can go ahead and entertain like maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then after that continue so that everybody has the opportunity to do the presentation, and then we'll go ahead and open it up at the end for additional questions. That way, we give everybody the designated time and we don't run out of time, because all the information here is really critical. So before we start, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, although I know they have name badges. I want you to be able to put a name to a face and not a square box. So if we can go ahead and start, Matsuna, can you start us off?
So I'm from the Math Department, Matsuna Ryan.
I'm from the Math Department also, Veronica Upa. Also, Math Professor Lydia Gonzalez.
Angela Medina Rhodes, English Department.
Michael Koger, English Department.
Carolyn Giordella, Institutional Effectiveness.
Mike Dervidian, Library and Instructional Support.
Esmeralda Casares, Student Trustee.
Cristal Orozco, President of the Board.
Anaís Medina Diaz, Vice President of the Board.
Rosalba Lomelli, Board Member.
Don Miller, DPA.
Alice Nico, Dean of Communications and Languages.
Van Briest, Dean of Mathematics, Sciences and Engineering.
Lisa Chavez, Dean of Counseling.
Julia Flores, Counselor.
So thank you, everyone. So this village is what created this presentation of information for you. So we're going to be going over the AB 705 and AB 1705, the legislation. It's going to be a lot of information. Again, we're going to give you big picture and really focusing on the requirements. It was not a choice; it was mandated requirements. And then our English deans and math dean will be going over what has changed prior to AB 705. What it would look like, and where are we at now? And then we'll have our counseling and our library talking about equitable and guided self-placement. What does that mean? What does it look like? And then how are the counselors taking that self-placement and walking students through? What does it look like when the counselors interpreting that or guiding students? And so how are they implementing that? And then our team of library will go over instructional support services. So what additional wraparound services are we having for students beyond like the just-in-time remediation? And then of course, Dr. Rodella will be going over success in transfer level math and English, multiple studies that we've had to date in different areas. And then last but not least, we'll have a fabulous faculty give you a presentation about what they've done to move the needle, things that they've tried, the lessons learned, and of course they will be sharing some of their goals, their future goals. Okay, so without that, I'm gonna be the timekeeper, and so I have the times down here, and so we'll again at the end just entertain 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll move on to the next. And we're actually set up in the order, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it on, and when you get the clicker, you pass it on to the next person. So there's Dr. Miller.
Okay, awesome. So my part is the boring part. It's the legislation. I'm going to actually shorten it by a bit because several bits of information are contained in other presentations by other folks. So I wanted to start off, before AB 705 became a law, we had in the 2000 teens the California Acceleration Project, which was looking at how to accelerate students through basic skills, math and English, and figure out how we could shorten the time to completion for all students. That then funding came through the Chancellor's Office to the tune of several $1 million, depending upon the size of the college, for the Basic Skills Student Outcomes Transformation Grant. That particular grant was geared towards what kind of student support services could we create that would help with acceleration, that could help with tutoring, could help with additional courses that would connect to our transfer level courses and so forth. So from there, because there was the perception that not enough progress was being made towards transforming basic skills, we wound up with AB 705. The legislation took effect in January 1st, 2018. And it's basically focused on the fact that placement and assessment strategies were deemed inadequate for putting our students at the right level and getting them to transfer level math and English in an appropriate pace and in an appropriate way. And so we have the research showed that standardized placement exams left many students behind, and the most detrimentally affected students were the disproportionately impacted students. They were majority BIPOC students, so students of color were most negatively impacted, not only nationally, but also with the data that the Chancellor's Office was collecting from our different MIS reports and so forth that were getting sent forward every year. And so basically it set up a set of criteria that we were supposed to follow for placing students, and it set up some basic criteria for placement processes that would use high school GPAs. And so there were categories set up, and those are shared in my slides, and then several slides later our English and math folks share those as well, so we won't go over those. But basically it showed, the data showed that students were being detrimentally affected by being misplaced into pre-transfer level math and English, sometimes 2 levels below transfer, 3 levels below transfer, 4 levels below transfer. And what tended to happen was the students that were placed in the lowest levels, actually the percentage of those that actually made it to completion of a transfer level course was almost zero the farther down that you went. So it might be, if they were 1 level below transfer, 50% of them would complete the transfer level course. Then 3 levels below transfer, it dropped to 30 or 25. And then if you get to 4 levels below transfer, it was at like 4% of them would actually ever make it to transfer level math and English or transfer level ESL. And so when we got, and then again, because there was concern from the legislature that AB 705 wasn't being completely implemented by all colleges in our system, by all 116 colleges, AB 1705 came into place, and it also clarified quite a few things, and I'll briefly review those in an upcoming slide. Let's kind of move on. There we go. All right, so these are geared towards multiple measures. The law has us focus on high school transcripts. What is the highest level of coursework that was completed by students before they come to us? Surveys of the students, vocational and career aptitude inventories. These are just a list of the possible ways that you could do multiple measures. And then these I'll leave for later because these are just the state-provided ones. We'll go into more details when we get there. So there was English, then there's statistics, liberal arts, mathematics, and then the STEM mathematics criteria. And that was basically the GPAs that were recommended for different types of placement. Then we received at several points requests for validations of practices. So if a college was still using the AccuPlacer, for example, for English or ESL or otherwise, the state said, great, show us your data, prove to us that AccuPlacer is helping students, or your practices are helping students advance at a proper level so that they can have throughput, so that that they will advance, move forward, get through, complete, have success, move on. Most colleges in the state were not able to show that, and so there were, we received reports from the Chancellor's office on a whole series of colleges that weren't able to do that. And so they set up, the idea is the maximizing the probability that students will complete transfer level English and math in their first year. And so the focus has been on that, and it's one of our new student-centered funding formula metrics, is having that completion occur. And so let me move on to the next one. This is just a variety of the data. AB 1805 was just one that focused on student equity and achievement program funding, and basically focused especially on transfer level coursework and academic credit ESL coursework, and just basically said you have to tell students that they can take transfer level coursework in very easily understandable language, that they understand that they don't have to start 7 levels below transfer in ESL or otherwise. So that was a minor pause in there. So again, we already talked about the validation of practices data, and folks will talk about this later, but here at Rio, through the great work of Dr. Durdella and the team in institutional effectiveness, they showed us that data last year that we had to submit to the to the Chancellor's office, and it was abysmal. It basically showed one metric, I think out of 32, that it was successful. So it became obvious, so that's at the time where we stopped and said, okay, starting next semester, we're not going to continue to offer the pre-transfer level math and English. And so ESL, we know we have options, placement exam or guided self-placement. This will be spoken about later, but right now at present we're focused in the ESL on guided self-placement. We can go into the details at another time or later if you'd like more of the rules. And this is just snippets of the legislation. The legislation is longer. It's basically focused also on so this is AB 1705, and it says by July 1st, all U.S. high school graduates and those who have received a high school equivalency certificates, regardless of background or special population status, who plan to pursue a certificate, degree, or transfer program shall be directly placed into and when beginning coursework in English or mathematics enrolled in transfer level English and math quantitative reasoning courses. So this is what 1705 focused on for us. Some of the other things too, that it clarified, not repeating, forcing students to repeat coursework they successfully completed in high school or college elsewhere. Sorry, I went past the very last slide. The nice thing about AB 1705 was it also created exceptions, and so it talks about students in, for example, our educational development courses. So these are DSPS students that may need some kind of additional support, and so it focuses on several of these things. It talks about what do we do with dual enrollment students that may be completing math as high school students and so forth. So these allowances broaden things for us and give more possibilities for very unique situations of students. And that's about it. I'm going to end there. There's tons of legislation and more I could share, but I don't know if anyone has any questions on those pieces.
And as you know, you have the board docs with the entire presentation. It's a lot of language, a lot of legislation that had to be put into practice. So, does any board have any questions on that section? Okay.
I do have, I just want to note for the record, Trustee Santana arrived at 6:13.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take a look at the structure of English and English as a new language, INLA. This is a graph to show you how things looked before AB 705. So students would come in, take a placement test, and based on the results, they would place either into English 30, 35, or 101. So in some cases, students needed to take 3 semesters worth or a year and a half worth of English in order to pass 101. And when that happens, there are a lot of opportunities for students to drop off of that trajectory. I mean, if you place into 30 and you don't pass 30, are you going to start 30 again? If you do pass 30, do you go into 35? If you don't pass 35, do you take it again? So it's just, you know, a long road for some students. We tried different things, as Dr. Miller mentioned. We used to just go by the placement test, and they brought in multiple measures. So you can't just give a test. You have to look at the high school score. You have to talk with the counselor about how well you did it in high school in English, etc. And just your own feelings about writing in general and reading. We tried things, again, like Dr. Miller described, acceleration, the California Acceleration Project, where faculty got together, professional development activities were designed about how to support students. And they talked about things like, well, you can, if a student doesn't have a concept, keep teaching them, but you can jump in and teach them that concept that they missed. We call that just-in-time instruction. They worked on ways to reduce the number of sections. So at one point, as we progressed, we did drop English 30. And we thought, okay, that'll help if we just get 2 classes instead of 3. You know, people tried things like, well, let's teach English in context of what the student's goal is, academic goal. Maybe that'll help. We worked with K-12s to see if we could build some, you know, collaboration there. And it was good work, but in the end, you know, we ended up with AB 705, which we now see has produced a much greater number of students completing English 101. So now we don't have a placement test. We do have students going through a guided self-placement, conversation with the counselor, a look at the GPA from high school. And based on the results of that placement, students can all join and take the English 101 class. We have 3 versions. We have 101 plus SP, which is support plus. And then we have 101 plus S, which is support. And then we have our regular 101. So ideally, students place in the 101 that has the appropriate amount of instructional support associated with it. When we do this, everybody gets their first chance is with 101. And when you do that, a lot more students actually finish. And that's what we refer to as throughput. Okay, a little bit about INLA. So INLA is different from math and English because those students have 3 years to pass English 101. And you can see in the past, we have a lot of inlet classes. So the same thing I described earlier, that same dynamic occurs. How do you get an inlet student to persist and eventually complete English 101? Now that we have AB 705, all non-native English speakers from K-12 will follow the English sequence. So going back, if you moved to California during high school, even if you came in your junior year, this is where you go, you guys are, or at any community college. We have designed something down below. You can see an excerpt from the schedule that shows how we've tagged some English 101 classes as recommended for those students whose first language is not English. And we assign that to an instructor who has both the ESL and English minimum qualification. Okay, but we do have to make decisions about INLA. We do need to make sure those students who take INLA can complete within 3 years, English 101 within 3 years. Right now we have INLA 34, INLA 100, and then English 101. So there's a question we're trying to find the answer to, and that is, do our students who take INLA 34 rely on that course to successfully complete English 101? And if they do, we might want to keep it. If not, maybe we need a 101 SP course that's designed for ESL speakers, or non-native English speakers, ESL learners. So that SP support segment could be designed specifically for non-native speakers. It's not a perfect scenario because everybody knows that learning a second language is not a matter of studying a lot. It's a matter of spending time and frequency with the second language. So we're waiting for that question to be answered. That'll help us out. And there's one more slide. This is a little bit hard to view, but this is the non-credit pathway for students who want to take ESL. And we cannot place students in this pathway, but we can make it available to students. It can be for people who may not have credit goals. And it's, as you can see, there's a lot of different pathways students can take from the very beginning of literacy level throughout. If you look on the bottom right, the certificate of competency for college prep is supposed to help students come on over to credit and succeed. But again, this is not required. It's not part of the placement tool. It's just another way that our community members can obtain English as a second language instruction. And that concludes my portion.
Any questions on that one?
Trustee,
Oh, go ahead.
Trustee Santana? So when you said about the 3 years, what is it that they have 3 years to complete?
They have 3 years to complete English 101.
And what happens if they don't?
If they don't, then we have not met our obligation as a community college. If they don't, then we need to do something different to make sure that they do. And so right now, we can do it if they do follow the current series, 34, 100, and then English 101. But maybe we don't need that many classes. We don't know yet. We're looking into the research behind that. And maybe it won't take 3 years if we can figure out a way to get people through in 2 or 1.5.
Then how long have we been tracking the data?
Well, we just now are looking at that data because ESL came after in AB 705, after English and Math. So once we did all the work with English and Math, now we're looking at ESL front and center. So we're in the midst of analyzing that data.
Good to know. Thank you. Trustee Romeli?
I was going to ask if there's any, maybe in the future slides, but will we get some data that goes along with these?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Dr. Bedell has the slides.
Okay.
What's the unit value difference between the English 101, SP, and S, and 101? Yeah, the 3, right?
Yeah. So the S is a 0.5 unit.
Okay.
And the SP, is it 1 unit? It's 1. Right?
Yes.
The SP, so it's is our 101 4 units?
It's 3 units with
Three
a half
plus
unit
the
left.
4, so that would be 4. and
It's
then
3.5. The
Yeah.
101 is 3.5.
Regular
Oh,
101,
the regular one is
3.5.
3.5.
3.5, yeah. And then we add the SP, now we're at 4.5 units. If you add,
And the S is 4.
Right.
right.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, I have another question. What kind of professional development does faculty get for the English as a new language sequence? Like, because I know you kind of talked about like the word, you tried all of these different things, right?
For English as a second language?
Yes.
Well, at Rio, in the credit program,
Or new language.
we don't have any real population of ESL students, I should say, because we have some full-timers, but they mostly teach English. We have one section of ESL, we call it INLA, and it doesn't fill, so we're talking maybe 16 students. And so it's actually hard to run studies on those students, but we haven't developed a lot of professional development for credit INLA because the population is very small.
That, well, I guess I have a lot of questions about that because I work with our English learners, and statewide we have in the K-12, we have about, even in my district, it's 1/3 of our students are, English learners, right? So it's a little different than the ELA one, but those students who are taking the regular English, the 101, I wonder, what kind of support they get, because many of them are English learners. So it's very difficult. I mean, when we talk, I'm sure we'll talk about it in math and stuff, because there's a lot of language when it comes to math that we're seeing, they struggle with at the K-12s, right? And so I just wonder what kind of professional development, we're getting.
Specifically for ESL.
Just in general.
Well, Dr. Okamoto, who's not here, has just done his dissertation in the 1.5 generation of language learners. And so we are glad to have him working with Garabedian because they're going to put some really cool things together.
Okay, great. Just because I see the English 101 and I'm wondering the success rate, that's why I want to see the data.
Yeah.
Just because you could, given the transfer level course, but what are we doing in the classrooms too? I know it's not in our, that's, 10 plus 1, but I'm just wondering, just would love to hear what kind of
English
professional
will share
development.
that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to go through the structure of the mathematics and plus a little bit of the history of some of the curricular changes, some of the efforts the mathematics department have started as a result of those, or planning for those curricular changes. I won't go into much detail. The math faculty will give you some details on the Aspen project a little bit later. So we go back a whole decade, back to 2012, when the math department tried this experiment, we called it Fast Track Math, which tried to eliminate the overlap between the basic skills classes. So we went from 4 classes to 3. In 2015 was the start of the California Acceleration Project. Here they tried to develop, again, to eliminate overlap between the courses, and also develop these courses so there was a developmental sequence for business and STEM majors, and then they designed a new class for those students who are going to go into statistics. That was Math 62 pre-statistics. We also, the faculty worked very closely with the counseling department to help implement our multiple measures. In 2016, with the assistance of Dr. Juana Mora and Dean Ceci Rocha, using the student equity funds, we started the Stat Success Center. We've always had problems getting qualified students to tutor statistics, because usually by the time they took statistics, they were leaving, so we didn't have enough experienced statistics students to tutor in stats. So we started paying the faculty to do individualized tutoring. That's still going on. In 2017, again, with the help of Dr. Juana Mora and Ceci Rocha, the dean, the student equity, we hosted Dr. James Gray, who was from the Center of Urban Education. He gave 2 presentations on equity-minded practices. Right, we're up to 2018. Well, the California Acceleration Project came to an end with the passage of AB 1705. So the faculty started gathering course outlines from local CSUs because they were going under a similar directive from their chancellor. Also in 2018, we brought back Math 150, which used to be called Liberal Arts Mathematics, is now called Survey of Mathematics. It's UC CSU transferable. I say we, I mean the math faculty, of course. They developed the E-courses. Those are the co-requisite courses for statistics, college algebra, trigonometry, and pre-calculus. Then, again, with the faculty, working with the staff of the Math Science Center, started creating topical workshops. These were like just-in-time workshops. So if the students needed help with parabolas in pre-calc, well then when the week they were covering parabolas, the MSC would be hosting workshops. Let's see, then, the math department individual math professors started taking responsibility for the coordination of all the activities for each course. So the statistics course would have one instructor who is responsible for course outcomes, making sure that the part-timers had textbooks assigned to their sections. They developed ancillary materials for the courses. They provided syllabi and exams to the part-timers in order to help the part-timers, one, help them become more of a bigger part of the department. In 2019. The faculty took part in the metacognitive student sport training. And here they were provided resources and professional development for teaching coworkers and support courses. So they learned about study skills, time manager, mindset, reading strategies, and self-assessment topics. The statistics activities training was, again, hands-on training for the faculty with activities and online resources for transferable statistics. And this was for both with and without the support courses. They also developed or started these professional learning communities, both for our Survey of Mathematics course and for our statistics courses. So they were talking about the content of the courses, study skills that the students needed, metacognition, effective domain lessons. They talked about the pacing of the classes, what classroom activities they were sharing, the activities that seemed to work. They introduced a finance project in the Survey of Mathematics courses. In 2019, we hosted Professors Beth Chance and Alan Rossman from Cal Poly Sloan, and there they learned about applets that were centered on statistics. We had colleagues also from Cerritos, Citrus, and Pasadena. So it was quite a large crowd that was partaking of this workshop. All right, 2020 brought another professional learning community. There was faculty participated in online discussions, pandemic of course, and they talked about growth mindset, grit, study skills, and they discussed topics from this book, 33 Simple Strategies for Faculty, a week-by-week resource for teaching first-year and first-generation students. For a long while, we've had online modular courses in the Math Science Center. These were individual, students would progress at their own pace. We allowed students to do like 25% of the content in an entire semester. So for the students who just needed more time on the topic, we allowed that. But here we converted the modular courses into more traditional online courses. I seem to remember the data showed that students were actually succeeding more by not giving them the freedom to take as much time as they wanted. It was a little bit more structured. And also we saw the institutionalization of our student success teams. I'd like to point out that all the faculty members that are on our student success team are mathematicians. All right, 2021, we had a lot of hope for our survey of mathematics courses. We really wanted students who either were not going into business, were not going into STEM, were not going into fields like psychology and sociology, because those majors need statistics. We really hope that our English majors, our arts majors, and other non-mathematical majors would be enrolling in our survey of mathematics. So we started an emphasis on promoting Math 150 to the campus. The mathematicians also, again, started focusing on common course policies so that all the syllabi, we hope that many of the syllabi will have the same sort of late policies, the same sort of exam policies, homework policies, so that students in all the sections kind of saw the same methods in the classroom. The faculty developed a faculty Canvas shell that facilitated the sharing of resources. In 2021 was Aspen, which I think was an emphasis of the board. The mathematicians will talk more about the Aspen project later. And also, we have, this summer, we have 16 faculty, 8 from STEM, 4 from behavioral and social sciences, and 4 from communication languages that will partake in the Escala professional development activities and learn more about culturally relevant pedagogy. All right, so now, you don't have to pay so much attention about the numbers up there, the 20, those are just the course numbers. So in basic skills, Math 20 was pre-algebra, that's basically arithmetic. 30 and 33 were, that's elementary algebra. 50 and 53.
20 was arithmetic, 30, 33 was algebra.
Okay.
You were one.
Oh, I was, okay, I was one off, okay. Okay, thank you, Lydia.
So because of time, I think the point is that if you could see the number of basic skills that we have, the numbers
Yes.
as you go through these, instead, you don't have to cite each course name.
No, okay, so basic skills, B-SLAM, that's the way I've separated this. It's business, statistics, and liberal arts math, and then STEM. So basically what you want to do is keep an eye on the number of sections that we schedule. So 10 years ago, we had 310 sections of basic skills, 28 of STEM. Oh, sorry. So number of basic skills stays the same. We see a little growth in statistics and in STEM. See, again, growth in the growth in the B-SLAM, a lot of that is due to the number of statistics courses that we're offering. Again, good growth in STEM. You see, starting to see a big decrease in basic skills, big jump in the number of B-SLAM sections, and 71 sections of STEM. Now we're in the heart of the pandemic. You'll see, again, the basic skills is coming down more because of AB 705 than AB 1705. But then you also see the slight effect in the B-SLAM and the STEM classes. Again, we're starting to get to 0 for the basic skills as per AB 705 and 1705. B-SLAM, STEM still holding strong. And the current now, we're fully compliant with AB 705 and 1705. We have 0 sections of basic skills. We have 115 sections of B-SLAM and then 58 sections of STEM. Now, if you want to see that in the graph, there you have it. Now, unfortunately, because of the huge effect of the basic skills, it kind of hides the good news that's happening in the statistics and the STEM area. We've seen good growth in those.
Thank you. Any questions on that section?
Okay, I just want to note that trustee Valladares arrived at 6:31 p.m.
Okay. So what does this all really mean for our students, and what does the process actually look like? Because we've talked a lot about legislation and about sections and professional development, but what does it look like from the student's perspective? So I am going to talk a little bit more about the legislation piece before I get to what it looks like for the students, but that really kind of sets the groundwork for why the placement looks the way it does, and then give more detail. We talk a lot about multiple measures. What I really appreciate what the Chancellor's Office has done more recently is to refer to it as equitable placement, because that's really what it is. It's about increasing access to the transfer level coursework, but also increasing the number of students who are completing the coursework. So our equitable placement. I'm not going to read the whole slide to you, but what I do want to focus on is at the top, maximize the probability that a student will enter and complete gateway transfer level, so that just means the first level transfer. And then at the bottom, the last 3 lines, placement into English and math with one or more of the following: high school coursework, high school grades, and high school grade point average. So we've been talking about multiple measures. These are just some of those multiple measures that we're considering when placements are made for our students. What we have, the model that we've implemented is the guided placement. So this one I will read. A process or a tool used to encourage a student to reflect on his or her academic history and educational goals that may include the student evaluating their familiarity and comfort with topics in English or mathematics. After completing the process, students will receive their course placement. So what we have implemented is a placement tool. In a few slides, I'll show you screenshots of what that looks like. So the guided placement is, it does ask them to provide some of those things that we talked about, the GPA, the grades, the courses that they took or completed. And all of our first-time college students are required to take the placement tool. So this is not just our direct matriculants, those that just graduated from high school, but anyone coming to Rio Hondo College that has no prior college experience. They are required to. Now, if we have continuing students, when we first implemented and still today, if they had taken the assessment test, they had the opportunity, and they still do, to do the placement tool. Because chances are their placement would have been different than what they got through AccuPlacer or any other commercially available assessment tool or test like Compass or AccuPlacer. That also goes for our transfer students. So if a student came from another community college or maybe from a university, they can take the placement tool to get a more accurate placement. And our returning students, those that came, left, and then came back. Dr. Miller touched on this. These were the statewide default placement rules, as they call them. And prior to full implementation of AB 705, Rio Hondo College was actually a pilot school for much of the data that was established in creating these default placement rules. What we're using today is actually version 2. Version 1 was slightly different. And I invited Dr. Flores here, our counselor, to be with us today because he was instrumental in that pilot project. And a lot of the tools that we use today and the guides that the counselors use, he was instrumental in putting that together. So here we see the default placement rules for English. And what you'll see on the left is what they call the high school performance metric. So in this case, it's the cumulative high school GPA. And when we talk about the GPA, it's non-weighted. So if there's AP and so forth, it doesn't include that. And we refer to them as GPA bands. So the one that would require The most level of support, so the support courses, is on the bottom. And then you'll notice on the right-hand side, so the right bottom, transfer level English composition, additional academic and concurrent support strongly recommended. And that's for high school GPA of less than 1.9. The middle band is additional academic and concurrent support recommended. So you notice a change in language where the bottom says strongly recommended to recommended, and then the top band with the highest GPA, no additional academic or concurrent support is required. So I won't go as detailed through the others, but you kind of get the idea. So there it is for the math, statistics, liberal arts, and then the B-STEM math. So this is what it looks like here at Rio Hondo College. So the blue bands denote where there's required support. So for English, in the bottom band with the highest level of support, and we're talking about units earlier, so here, you can see it, Alice is pointing out that there is an adjustment.
Yeah, I think it would be the 3.5 for the 101, and then the S course adds a half a unit. So it would be 3.5 from the top, then 4, and then 4.5. Yeah.
My apologies.
I'm sorry for not providing you that information.
Then we have for the math, statistics, and liberal arts. Here, the blue band on the bottom is the required support. In the middle band, it is recommended but not required. And then in the top band, there is no required support. However, a student can choose, even if they're not in a band where they have no required support, they can choose to choose a section that does have required support. And later on, Dean Garabini will also refer to additional support outside of the classroom that they can get. Here it is for B-STEM Gateway courses, again, the first level. And then for the higher level, transfer level math courses, B-STEM. So I wanted to point that out so that you can see from a student's perspective that all of them are eligible, I guess you can say, to register for any, well, not any principal, but any of the first level transfer math and English courses. Let me go back a slide. I talked earlier about placement and how our first year students are required to do the placement, and how we may have continuing students or returning students that may still have, say, an AccuPlacer placement. When we first implemented, we did a big campaign to get students to do the placement, to update that. If there was a situation where a student did not do the placement, every student can enroll in the lowest band with the required support. So if they didn't have a placement for whatever reason, they don't need to do any extra steps. They could enroll in any of the CRNs at the bottom. So when students first come here, the placement tool is one of the required matriculation steps. And so that you can get an idea of what the process looks like and how we first rolled out 8705, we're going to play a short video that we shared with our students.
Did you know that students are no longer required to take an assessment test to enroll in math and English? A new law went into effect fall 2019 that allows students to enroll in first level transfer math and English. Rio Hondo College now takes into consideration high school information such as cumulative, ongoing GPA, highest level math or English attempted, and other student information instead of taking an assessment test.
New and continuing students should enter their high school information on the placement tool located in their Access Rio student portal. It doesn't matter how long ago you attended high school. On the left-hand side, choose Academics. Scroll down to Placement Tool and you'll see 3 options. The first is for new students. Choose the alternate link if you get an error. Option 2 is for continuing students. And the third option is for students who completed English, reading, ESL, or math at another college. You'll be directed to the Placement Tool where you enter your Rio Hondo College student ID number your high school overall GPA, and additional student information. After answering the questions on the placement tool, students must meet with the counselor to discuss their course placement. They'll be advised which course is appropriate for them and what level of support will give them the best opportunity to pass the class. For example, all students will be able to enroll in English 101 with the required support course English 10 SP. Some students will enroll in English 101 with the required support course English 10S, and others will enroll in English 101. Support courses are also available for Math 130, Math 150, Math 160, Math 175, and Math 180. The class schedule will note which courses have a required support course. In this example of English 101, the first section, 37180, does not have a required support course. The next one, 37191, has a required support course of English 10S, CRN 37834. Both CRNs must be entered at the same time when registering via Access Rio.
So how do you know which course you should enroll in? Sign into Access Rio, complete the placement tool, and meet with a counselor.
Because it was so new, we really wanted our students to understand that they're not going to sit down and take a test the way that they were accustomed to, but rather guide them to Access Rio to do the placement tool and to really emphasize how important it is for them to meet with a counselor. So here's just some screenshots of the placement tool, asking about their overall GPA. We also wanted to know, do they have an IEP or a 504 plan in order to have that discussion when they meet with the counselor and possibly direct them to EDUP courses. We asked them to get an idea of their educational goal. Do they plan on transferring to a four-year institution? Also, because there is the math pathway to the statistics, liberal arts, or the B-STEM, we want to ask if any of the majors, those are if they would follow the B-STEM pathway. We ask what highest level of English you completed, but we also ask what is the English class that you enrolled in now? Because if the student is in their senior year, they're probably in their highest level of math or English in that semester, and what grade did they get for those that were completed. And then once they have submitted their placement tool, they get a placement. But as we stated earlier, we need them to talk to a counselor so they can really understand what that placement means, what a support course is, and how to register for that class. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Flores.
So on the slide here, it just shows you the multiple points that students have to go through to understand their placement based on the placement that they were given on having done the placement tool. One of those first points would be the educational planning workshops, or the EPWs. They're basically a facilitation in a group counseling type of format where students go through a presentation about resources on campus, they see the English sequence, the math sequence, what the support classes look like, and then after that, they work with the counselor to do an abbreviated educational plan, ensuring that they have an English and math course within the first semester to ensure that students take English and math in the first semester, because that's our goal. If a student doesn't attend one of our EPWs, they find out about counseling through another format of onboarding, which would be the online orientation. And through the online orientation, they'll also see the sequence of English and math with the support and information surrounding support courses. And they have the option to either do a 15-minute counseling session, which is our drop-in. Usually that's for the student who already doesn't really have concerns about their placement, but rather need guidance on which course to select. Am I going SLAM? Am I going STEM? And so a counselor can assist them with that. If a student needs further scaffolding with regards to their decision or selection of the course, they are offered a 45-minute appointment, and that's when a student does sit with the counselor for 45 minutes, going over the sequences of math and English again, and going over the support classes that are offered in English and math, as well as a holistic approach that we kind of implement to ensure that we're not just looking at the high school GPA, but also non-cognitive variables like self-efficacy, motivation. We ask the student what were their favorite subjects or what did they enjoy from school to get a better understanding of what exactly their experiences like were in school to help them make a better decision. So it's a holistic approach. We also ensure that students counseling faculty have bi-weekly meetings where we look into best practices or best approaches, and we consult with each other to see how to best facilitate, always keeping the best interest of the student. If at the end a student doesn't agree with their placement, then there is the co-requisite challenge that can be referred to the dean and faculty to challenge that placement.
Thank you. They do also have additional assistance. Dr. Flores referred to orientation, so during the required orientation for first-time students, it is discussed. The Rio Success Lab, which used to be the assessment center, so if a student needs help with their Access Rio responding to the placement tool, they can get assistance there, and also at the Student Success Center. There's computers available there, so they can sit there also and get some assistance in completing the placement tool and or meeting with a counselor. And now I'll turn it over to Dean Garabedian to talk about other assistance available.
Any
questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Lomeli?
Just really quick, so at the beginning I thought, so the additional course is, it looked like it was embedded, right? But then it looked like it's at, I think one of your slides looked like it was a separate unit. So is it embedded in the classroom or is it another class, the support, the additional support?
For English?
Or math?
Okay. So for English, it is a separate class. Yeah, so you have the 101, they register for that, and then they have to register in a separate 10S or 10SP class.
And that's the one unit, an extra unit?
The SP is an extra unit, and the S is a half unit.
I'm sorry, the S is 1 unit, and the SP is 2. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
We're sitting here throwing around numbers like we know what we're talking
Yes.
about.
It's
That's what I was kept thinking.
Well, I keep thinking about
Yeah.
the load, like it's 6.67% for the faculty to teach this, so it's 13.33, so we just can't do our own math.
So how many total units?
Well, okay, so
How many total units is that English class then?
So 101 is 3.5.
Uh-huh.
101 plus S is 4.5, and
Goodness.
SP is 5.5.
So Dean Chavez was correct, and we focus too much on load and not instructional units, so my apologies.
Can I ask a question? Oh, are the same students that are in the support class also in the regular
Yes.
class? So why aren't we co-recting those so that they can enroll in one stop instead of?
I can explain that.
Okay.
Okay, so the problem
Because
is,
it seems to make it difficult for students to have to.
it is difficult, and we didn't want it to be like that. We wanted to have one course.
Correct.
The problem was we could not get it to articulate with the universities, and so we were forced to break them in two.
So the 10S is a local course that only S and SP, that's for here, but the 101 will transfer over when they go to CSU or UC.
Well, we can talk later, because I think you can still co-rec them so that a student, when they register one or the other, automatically
Yes.
register for both, and you still keep the shell separate, so that students don't have to, I was like, oh, I have to write down both CRN numbers, and so we would still do it where we co-rec them, you're talking about, with the section, I'll explain it later. But anyways,
This is
just so
the
that
best
you
way to figure out.
yeah, I think that way the students, it's not so complicated, and they see it as two, and it still comes up separate in transcript or articulation, but.
And it's the same block of time.
Yes.
Like, so for like, if I have a math class with a co-rec, then I have them for an extra hour on one of the days.
Oh, gosh. Okay,
So
that's
we
right.
don't really like shift gears, and now I'm in this other
Yeah.
class. It's the same group of
Yeah.
students.
So it's embedded.
But
Yeah.
initially it's a separate class, but it's
Okay.
this like extended
Perfect.
time.
Okay.
Do you have any more questions? Trustee Santana?
So what is it that SP consists of? So are you working on elements from that day's class and more like tutoring? What is it? What is that?
The course outlines for 10S and 10SP, we wrote them so that those focus specifically on writing intensive skills. It's not supposed to be, okay, now we have more time to discuss this reading. It's, okay, let's talk about grammar, let's talk about workshopping, basic fundamentals of writing, to provide that support that those students might need for what happens in just the one-on-one portion of class.
And the additional time that the faculty member has with the student is really important. and it allows them additional time to focus and give individual attention to students that they wouldn't typically have in just the 101 transfer class. So it really, it makes a really big difference.
And then the other question I have is, how many students use the additional support that was discussed on the previous slide?
The orientation and so forth?
Go back
For
to
the-
the slide.
Who has
Who has
that?
it?
One more?
No, go back. Is that back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, never mind. So you had said that you offer different points of the additional support for students to be able to take up like the workshops and stuff like that. How many, do our students use them?
So what I was referencing in this slide is, especially when it was new, it was a mind shift for us, but also for our students, right? Oh, what do you mean I'm not supposed to take a test? Well then, how do I know what math and English I'm supposed to go to? So students have still gone to what was called the assessment center, thinking that they're going to take a test, and the staff then will guide them on doing the placement tool. All of our first-time students have to do the orientation. I would say the one that probably has the most traffic is the Student Success Center. So that's in the LRC, and it's on the first floor. It's kind of like a catch-all, like whatever you need help with, come talk to us. And so a lot of students would go there, and we have success coaches there, we have classified staff, we have counselors. They can help them answer the placement tool, and then the counselors can meet with them in the same space to talk about what that means. The classified staff and the coaches can help them find the class, because it is confusing with those two CRNs. Like, how do you do that? So showing them how to do that, like actually navigating the Access Rio and how to enroll in the course.
Thank you.
I have one just quick follow-up. So students are coming in, completing their orientation, doing the tool, so all students are meeting with the counselor. Are we losing any students that opt out of not meeting with the counselor, or how does that work?
So we have required matriculation steps, and the three are the orientation, the placement tool, and meeting with the counselor to do their first semester abbreviated plan. So those are our first-time students. Again, not just the ones directly to high school, but anyone brand new. And so they would be required to do that. So in that case, unless students can, if they're here, not to be awarded a degree or certificate, let's say they're just taking courses because they want to learn something for just the enrichment piece, they can fill out a form to waive those matriculation steps, but nearly all of our first-time students, because otherwise they have holds, so they have to come in order to do those matriculation steps.
Are we offering that online also?
The orientation is online.
The meeting with the counselor?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Online and in person.
Great,
Thank you.
So tonight I'm just going to speak with you briefly about three top-level topics. Because it's an ambiguous term that we've already heard so far, we'll talk first about what instructional support is at Rio Hondo. Second, the ways in which instructional support staff and faculty have taken explicit steps over the past 2 semesters especially to shape resources and services to introduce students to foundational skills formerly taken up in courses prohibited by AB 705 and 705. And finally, developing and to be developed efforts in instructional support that will continue to expand resources and services with an eye toward honing students' mastery of those foundational skills. So the term instructional support is, as I said, used in different senses, depending on the context. But here we'll take it to mean the provision of specific kinds of resources and services undertaken and administered outside of class at centers and labs on campus, whose purpose is to help students understand concepts in the classes in which they're enrolled, including homework help, but also to develop research and study skills. And now in the wake of AB 705 and 1705, fundamental math and English skills. In practice, this means tutoring that happens by appointment, but also on the fly at the centers, and also embedded tutors who actually work alongside students in the classes in which they're enrolled. Those happen through the centers that I'm talking about. And workshops that are often developed in concert with instructional faculty members that can take up concepts in a particular course, but also that focus upon fundamental skills the course might require. Of course, traditionally, we tend to identify these sorts of interventions as academically focused, which is why the Division of Library and Instructional Support is under the aegis of academic affairs. However, just prior to the pandemic and subsequent switch to remote learning, folks here in various roles begin to think about a more capacious conception of support and instructional support that included the sort of caring and attention that's now enshrined in the college's vision statement, and which increasingly is referred to as holistic support. So this reimagined understanding of instructional support happens to align with the return to campus and the reconstitution of the Basic Skills Committee, renamed the Foundational Skills and Instructional Support Task Force last year, whose name also might change, but it's a long story. That's chaired by myself and also the aforementioned Learning Assistance Center faculty coordinator, Dr. Tyler Okamoto. And the task force comprises representatives, some of whom are here, faculty, administrators, and staff, as well as student representatives from ASRHC, and from both the academic affairs and student services side of the house. And this task force has emerged as a kind of unofficial advisory committee to institutional support personnel. So we're reciprocally developing and sharing ideas related to the provision of academic resources and services, and also what are sometimes called basic or extra academic needs, so in order to foster student success. And the importance of shaping instructional support in no small part to address a post-AB 705 and 1705 ecosystem is really encapsulated in an early version of the task force charge. Quote, members from academic affairs and student services will collaborate to review, develop, and implement high-touch supplemental support and instructional services and resources for all students in all courses, paying particular attention, and here's the point, to foundational skills development in the areas of college-level English and math. So tonight I'm just going to focus on two primary instructional support centers, the Learning Assistance Center, aka the LAC, and the Math, Science, and Engineering Center, aka the MSEC. Sorry, Van, are we calling it the MSEC now? There's a different pronunciation now.
MSEC.
Okay, gotcha. I got it right.
You did?
All right. Right. So both these places are staffed by first-rate professionals, some of whom are represented in this photo. And this photo includes Tyler Okamoto, there on the very right, in the back row, who in addition to MSCC Senior Instructional Assistant Enrique Bravo, as well as Senior Instructional Assistant at the LAC, Hector Molina, helped to put this presentation together, so I wanted to make mention of them. Other folks on the teams at the LAC and MSCC include Kathy Gomez, Hao Wanbo, Juan Mendez, Irene Chapo, Gerardo Bustamante, Valerie Sextume, Lisa Sandoval, and Elsa Anguiano, and the MSEC faculty coordinators, Cameron English. So, just a few more salient items about instructional support before I talk about the goings-on there at the LAC and the MSCC. You may have reflected that it's appropriate that the Dean of Library and Instructional Support is the one who's addressing you about instructional support. But prior to summer 2020, I actually had no administrative responsibilities associated with instructional support. It was only when an administrative reorganization brought about by COVID-19 and also communications and language team at Alice Mecum, serving as interim vice president of the college that had me take over from Dean Mecum the supervision of the LAC, as well as the supervision of staff from the now defunct Reading Lab and 2 senior instructional assistants from the now shuttered Business Lab. For various reasons that I'll touch upon in a second, we discovered putting the Learning Assistance Center, the LAC, under the purview of the Dean of Library and Instructional Support, and within the division called Library and Instructional Support, makes good sense. And as such, with the support of Deans Priest and Mecum, the Dean Priest being the current administrator who runs the MSEC, and Dean Mecum being the former administrator who runs the LAC, it's been suggested that not only the LAC but the MSEC also come under my direction. And these organizational shifts just happen to align with the happy physical shift as well, since the shuffling of personnel and service points related to the Ray Theater renovation brought the MSEC, previously in the Science Building, into the Learning Resource Building alongside these other centers. And the upshot here is that the LAC and the MSCC are now neighbors on the first floor of the Learning Resource Center. And since I made this in MS Paint, I'm going to get as much mileage as I can out of this. But you can see there that the Math Science Center is now in 114 at the top there. That's the former location of the LAC. Learning Assistance Center has moved over to 118 and combined with the Writers Resource Center, and that is adjacent now to the Writing Center. So we now have all of these centers who are dedicated to a common enterprise, physically attached, physically proximate to one another, and that's very helpful. The upshots, the physical proximity in conjunction with the reorganization I just described has resulted this year in some of these things. So increased accessibility for students who know that the provision of learning support, resources, and services happens appropriately in a learning resource center. And the ability for personnel in those places to interact with one another in 4 dimensions in order to refer students to one another in order to find the best place for them. A consolidation of outreach efforts and advertisement efforts so that instead of instructional support centers sending out different information in different formats at different times, but basically describing common services differently, we're now working towards consistency of the look, feel, and accessibility of these documents and graphics. And as already mentioned, cooperation among IS personnel. So instead of the siloization that sort of happened before, even among really great professionals, we have these dedicated personnel in the centers sharing ideas and information about what they do every day. And then finally, standardization of resources and services for the purposes of interoperability, as well as extensibility of services, data collection, which is going to be fundamental, and things like clarifying to students as well as personnel the resources and services in these centers. Because in the words of Enrique Bravo, we want to make these centers destinations to which students want to come, not because they have to come there, but because they want to come there and they know that instructional support is going to be key to their academic success. And part of this latter piece is making certain everyone on campus knows what instructional support is and where students can get it. More on this in a second. So just really briefly, far and away, like I said, tutoring is the service that's most closely associated with the work of these centers. Tutoring happens on campus and it happens remotely, as indicated by this poster for the MSCC. Currently, in addition to tutoring for walk-ins, there's an appointment system at the LAC that the MSEC is slowly going on to. And tutoring also, as I said, happens in an embedded context via Rio's Gateway Tutor program. And I do have some statistics here, but I'm not going to share them just yet, because I know time is of the essence. So another way that resources and services are provided are via study sessions and workshops. Increasingly, these things are developed in concert with instructional faculty, and Van Priester talked about this a little bit. Workshops and study sessions have always been a part of instructional support, but now a greater proportion of these workshops and study sessions will take up foundational skills and concepts in math and English. These are just a few of the recent outreach efforts. And then, to quote Enrique Bravo again, half of our battle in instructional support is getting the word out and getting people in the door. So outreach and programming is very important. And it's something, of course, that our colleagues in marketing will tell us, but these sorts of efforts are not insignificant. Even seemingly sort of mundane things like the look and feel and accessibility or simplicity of outreach materials really can make the difference between whether a student comes in or not. So to this end, one aspect of newly cooperative instructional support efforts involve tutor visits to classrooms, where at the beginning of semesters, representatives come to classes to tell them about the services. Arranging for classes, English 101 and 201, for example, to come to the centers, just like library tours. Automatically enrolling literally thousands of students who might benefit from instructional support in Canvas modules. And that's what you're seeing here right now, just a little quick screenshot from Canvas. Folks are automatically enrolled in that, and they can click on there to get more information about services and resources. This is something that came up in the pandemic, but everyone agreed this is a really good thing. And then coordinated advertising, where again, we're really consolidating the look and the feel of the different advertisements that go out from the centers in order to simplify getting the word out. So a few in-process efforts and strategic aspirations. Tyler Okamoto is really leading the charge on consolidating and professionalizing tutor training, specifically through CRLA certification. That is the College Reading and Learning Association. This is not a requirement at all, but it's really going to go a long way to standardizing and professionalizing the tutoring that goes on here. And there's plans in the work to get tutors in the MSEC on for The types of outreach that we do, we want to do them more frequently. And then we really need usage data and statistics reformulation. And so to that end, over the summer, instructional support is working with institutional effectiveness to develop several survey apparatuses to make sure that the data that we're bringing in will allow us to measure the success that we're aiming for. A few more things: expanded English workshops, early alert integration, where students who might be struggling, their names can be sent directly to staff and faculty in the centers. And then, as I said, holistic support, really making these places into spaces that students want to go to because they're comfortable, safe, helpful, etc. And I think that's it for me. Any questions?
Any questions from my colleagues?
Just a comment for the board. Moving the Math Science Engineering Center down from the science building actually facilitated quite a bit of important movement at the college, so that we were able to move the nursing, the entire nursing program up into the science building from the portables. And then because of the Ray and music theater changes and them being temporarily unavailable, we were able to move music and the theater programs into the portables for now. So making these changes actually allowed for a very cohesive, as Dean Garabedian explained, connected set of learning resource centers in one physical space, centralized. And just so you know, in June you will see under the latest set of academic affairs reorganization plans, the one that actually officially puts those different centers under Dean Garabedian, so that it also creates the official cohesive unit to go with the current physical cohesiveness of the centers.
Any questions? Comments from my colleagues? No? Okay, we are going to take a 5-minute recess to use the restroom and grab some food. We'll be back. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Not that you have to use that to prove a point, but well played.
Okay, we are gonna get started.
I saw you.
Oh, I will. You know when they're ready. Okay, so we will resume with Dr. Jordan. We ready? I think we're I'll start my timer. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm here to talk about some of the work that we've done in the Institutional Effectiveness Office. The work has been done by myself, Dr. Connie Tan, and Sarah Cote. So in this section of the presentation, what I really want to do for you is three things. Describe the major studies and research questions that we've been working on, and the body of work that we've produced for this presentation it's the culmination of about 2 to 2.5 years of work. And then also present the results, what we found from these studies, so that we can facilitate understanding of AB 705 in the local context here at Rio. And then describe some of the tools at the end that we've developed through our data warehouse and data visualizations that help. These tools are important because they really help our faculty understand how their students are doing in their classes. Anytime, they don't have to call us, they can just log into the system and take a look. Right, so like it really puts the information in the hands of the users and the faculty to take action, right? So previously the old modality was they had to call us up and make a research request, right? So now we're trying to kind of push that out so they don't have to do that. So there are kind of 4 areas of the major studies. The first one is what I call access and completion. This is really kind of the policy objectives of AB 705. So to what degree have we achieved the policy objectives of AB 705? And this is something we put together this semester, and this particular component of what I'm going to present is a replication of the Public Policy Institute of California, PPIC, their methodology. The second one is what we call our AB 705 local implementation reports. And so we've done a total of 3 of these. So we did one in spring 20, 2021, 21-22. And then we also did a special version of this, which we call the AB 705 implementation update with special POPs, right? Special populations of students. And then we've done what we call the math and quantitative reasoning studies. So we looked at Math 130, we looked at finance, psychology. I'm only going to present the math portion of this study here tonight because I could talk for 3 hours and no one wants that. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is the Aspen evaluation for cohort 1, because this is an example of a program evaluation and a program that was used to facilitate completion in Math 130. Okay, so there are 5 main research questions here, and so forgive me for this, but like it sort of frames the whole thing. So the first one is, has AB 705 accomplished the broad policy objectives, right? So the 2 broad policy objectives were increasing access to transfer level courses and increasing throughput of students, right? So for the state, it's like the numbers. For PPIC, they report those in percentages. So in the first set of slides, you're going to see it's all reported in percentages. And then the second part of that is, in the achievement of those policy objectives, are there differences observed for specific groups of students, right? So do some students do better than others, right? And then the other piece that I think is really important here that is part of the PPIC methodology is, and I think it's really important here at Rio because we got a lot of questions about this when we went to the Academic Senate with the Special Populations Group. So is the AB 705 approach or model better than historical models,
right? So the historical models were what Dean Meekum and Priest talked about, where you have stacked classes, a series and sequence of classes, where you have opportunity for what they call leakage of students along the way, and it takes students a lot longer to go through that sequence. So is it better, right? Because we got a lot of that. And then, again, looking at those instructional approaches, are there differences observed for specific groups of students? And so then the next question is, looking beyond those broad policy objectives, for whom does AB 705 work? So this is where we're going to report on our implementation update that we did for Academic Senate about, are there certain populations of students that don't fare as well in this particular model of instruction? And then our Math QR success study, we looked at, what institutional barriers can we identify to student success in these particular courses? And then finally, for Aspen, how have potential solutions such as Aspen helped to ameliorate barriers to student success? Okay, so that's what I'm going to be talking about. It's a lot. One of the things I want you to keep in mind when we go through these studies is these are different studies, different methodologies, different definitions. It's not always going to be an apples to apples comparison. But the thing that matters here is what patterns do you observe, right? And what conclusions can you draw from the patterns I'm going to present to you? The other thing I would like for you to keep in mind is some of the numbers of students and the data that I'm going to show you can be quite small. And I have those numbers as backup if you're interested. It's one of the reasons I'm going to focus primarily on our Latinx student population because it is the largest number of students. And that's not, it's just mathematical. So that's why I'll be focusing on that. Okay, so the first set, and just a reminder of the research questions, this is the PPIC study. So have we accomplished the broad policy objectives? Is it better than the historical approach? And are there differences among different students? Okay, so here what we see is we've had a sizable increase in overall access to transfer level courses. And I'm going to get up close because I can't see and I don't have a pointer. So here what you see is fall 2018, right? And then we're comparing to post-implementation, which is 19. Blue is math, orange is English. Okay, so 18 is a pre-implementation, so you can see access to the transfer level courses went from 29% roughly to almost 74% for math, so that's a substantial increase in students who can access those classes. And then in English, it went from about 71% to 97%. So we, accomplished that objective in terms of the policy, right? Then here what we're doing is we're showing it by different racial and ethnic groups. So we have blue is Asian, orange is Black or African American, gray is Hispanic or Latinx. And it's consistent throughout, so gray will always be in the presentation Hispanic or Latinx, and then yellow is white. So if you look way back prior to the implementation here in fall 2015, and you look at Latinx students, we had about 7% in transfer level math, right? Who were able to access transfer level math of our Latinx students. That went all the way up to 100% in fall 22 because we're not really offering the below transfer level classes anymore. And then same thing in English. It was a little bit better in English. We had, or more than a little bit, we had 46% here of Latinx students, and then now 100% accessing those transfer level classes. So this is course completion rate. So the first graphs that I showed you were access. Do they have access to these classes, right? Now this is, did they complete those classes? So looking at this, we're looking at the proportion of first-time takers of math and English classes, successfully completing them with a grade of C or better within one term. So first-time takers, first term taking the class.
So blue is math, orange is English. So you can see in fall 2018, we had about 15%. Here in fall 2019, we went up to 32 for math. And you can see during the pandemic, it's a little uneven, but the overall message here is that higher percentages are completing, and that even though we have variable rates in the pandemic, it's still higher than pre-AB 705, much higher. Same thing for English, right? We went from 44% up to 58% pre-pandemic. Fall 2020, a little more anomalous because we were doing, during the pandemic, we had EW grades, right? So everything was affected. But if you look, you had 44, you're still higher, 51, 54, right? So higher percentages of students completing those classes. Then here again, we're looking at by ethnic or racial group. So again, here, this is successful completion of those transfer level courses, and we're focused mostly on the Latinx students here because the numbers are higher. So here in fall 2015, this is 4%, right, for math. Went up to 30% in fall 2019, 53% in fall 2022. So much better. And then same type of progress in English. Prior to AB 705, we have about 31%, goes up to 57, and then slightly down to 53 in fall 22, but still much higher than pre-AB 705 implementation. But you can see that there's still some gaps that exist in performance. Even though the trajectory is up, there's still some equity gaps between the groups. Okay, so now getting to the question of, is this a better model, AB 705, rather than the traditional models of the course sequencing? So we have what we call the below transfer level model, which is blue, and that is 1 year throughput. And then the 3-semester transfer level model, right, so fall to fall, that's orange. And then the co-requisite model, which is the one term. So you can see the highest level of performance. This is transfer level math, or SLAM, so statistics and liberal arts math. This is BSTEM, so business, science, technology, engineering. And then this one right here on the right, all the way to the right, is transfer level English. So what you can see here is that the gray bar, the co-requisite model, which is the post-AB 705 implementation, has the highest throughput in the shortest amount of time. Same graph here, but mostly this is for our Latinx students, same pattern of success for the co-requisite model. Okay, next question. So for whom does it work? This gets at the special populations I talked about earlier. Let me find my notes. I'm moving fast. I don't want your eyes to glaze over. Have a point if you want to have your hands full. Okay, for whom does it work? So again, looking beyond, are there groups of students for who this doesn't work as well, right? So these are all numbers, and it's the way that we do the statistical testing, right? So we're looking for expected counts here. So when we did this locally, the way that this differs from PPIC is this is the number of first-time math or English takers who successfully complete transfer level math or English with a grade of C or better in 1 year rather than one term, right? So we give them 1 year. And then the sample only includes first-time transfer level math or English 101 takers, whereas PPIC includes more than English 101 as long as it's transfer level. So here what you can see is the dramatic increase in successful completions in math. So we went from 615 in 2018 all the way up to 1167 in fall 21, and then slightly higher for English, right? Then if you look at, this is access, I'm sorry, access here. So access increased, and then this is successful completion on the right.
So successful completion went up for math and slightly down for English. So who fared better in this, right? So this is the question of for whom does it work? And so we saw that we had statistically significant differences for our Hispanic or Latinx students. They did better under the AB 705 model. Female students also did better. Younger students did better, less than 20. And then our non-EOPS students did better. And then these are students who didn't quite do as well. We expected the counts to be different than they were, and they were lower than what we expected. So we have our Asian students did a little bit less well. This is English. So the previous one was math. Sorry, this is English. So our Hispanic Latinx students didn't do quite as well. Female students didn't quite as do as well. Math, male students, Latina females, Latino males, we cut it by every different way. And so we had a lot more students who didn't do quite as well in English. We don't know why.
Yeah.
So the key takeaways here are that in access and completion and our special population updates, so we see continued increase in access for first-time takers in both transfer level math and English. So the pipeline of students having those courses available to them continues to increase, right? So that's very important from a policy perspective. And then we have some mixed outcomes locally for math and for English. We're not quite sure why English went down. It went down. And then, let's see, right, so that's pretty much, those are the takeaways. Oops. So institutional barriers. This one's very interesting, and I did work myself, and Connie worked very, we worked with Lydia, hand in glove, on this particular project. So what institutional barriers have we identified? So I'm just picking a few things from this project. And what you see here is a summary of section level success rates for Math 130, which is the statistics class. It's the class that most of our students are taking. And then English 101. So these numbers are for 21-22. And so what you see here is that we report the number of sections. For each class, we report the highest success rate for a section was 93.8. The lowest here was a 0. We have the standard deviation. You can see there's a high degree of variation in the success rates for sections of math. The average success rate was 47.3. And our institution set standard, which we do for accreditation, is 72%. So we report that as well. So you can see same type of success dispersion for English. So then what we did was we cut this by, for Math 130, we cut this by, we created a distribution around the average. And so we did 1 standard deviation from the average plus or minus, 2 standard deviations, etc. So lowest success rates were 2 standard deviations from the average, which is here. And then this is 1 standard deviation, and the same thing in the other direction, right? And so what we wanted to show here is, okay, so we've got Math 130, and we've got this dispersion of success rates across 30 different instructors, right? And then we're showing the number of sections and the total enrollment in those sections. So trying to give context to the institution and the department about what degree students are impacted depending on the type of course they're enrolled in of that class, right, or the instructor. And so here we give the range of success rates across these 4 instructors in these sections, so you can see that in the bands, right? And then this is the weighted average, which just takes the total enrollments, right, as a denominator and the number of successful completions, and gives the rate for that particular band. So then, with Van's cooperation, we redacted, we gave him a list of instructors and we gave him a letter. And we said, okay, if you can, please pull the syllabi for Math 130 for these instructors. Don't tell us who they are, redact all the names, just label it A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because we didn't want to know who the instructors were. But what we did want to do was look at the syllabi, right? So do a qualitative analysis of the syllabi. And so we wanted to try to determine if we look at instructors with lower success rates versus higher success rates, what kind of different practices can we observe just looking at the syllabi among those instructors. And so we looked at assignment structures, online versus written homework, attendance policies, right? Makeup policies, extra credit policies, and equity principles. And for equity principles, we use the USC Center for Urban Education cues. I think they had 6 factors on the syllabi that they hoped to see for robust equity practices. So, so we did that analysis. And then, so essentially, you know, there's a wide variation in section level success rates. Wide variation. So that's an institutional factor, right? And then we had a low of 9.7, a high of 93%. And then the syllabi review, just looking at that without talking to anybody. So just kind of taking numbers and syllabi, right? Without talking to any of them, any of the faculty. Like we can kind of, there's variation in policies as evidenced through the syllabi that may lead to differences in section level success rates. And so that's what we wanted to show, right? So structure of homework assignments, opportunities to drop your lowest exam score, use of partial credit, for example. And then what we noticed here when we did this was that according to the USCQs, everyone we looked at, there were no equity examples in the syllabi. That doesn't mean that there were any equity examples in the classroom. It just means we didn't see it in the syllabi. We didn't do any classroom observations. Okay, last one, Aspen. So Aspen, how has Aspen helped to ameliorate barriers to student success? So for Aspen, this is our first cohort, and this is your first look at the preliminary eval. So we did, again, a syllabus review using the USCQs. Aspen also had, as part of the project, instructors participating did a classroom climate survey, and then we looked at course success rates of the Aspen instructors. So looking at the syllabi post-Aspen, so in terms of the equity principles, as evidenced through cues, we saw much clearer language in the syllabi, additional references to campus resources, so more student supports as evidenced in the syllabi, more language about care and support and growth mindset, clearer outlines of expectations, so transparency, and I think in cues they call that demystifying. And then we also observed that there could be some improvements on the direct language, right? So, and then the attendance policies tended, after Aspen participation, tended to be less punitive, and then additional opportunities to earn extra credit, and acknowledgement of life circumstances contributing to missed exams, etc. So that's what was observed in the syllabi analysis. So the classroom climate survey. So the classroom climate survey measured 3 dimensions. So the classroom environment, and this is some of the content here on the survey, so clear and understandable content, participation and discussion encouraged, atmosphere of welcoming questions and opinions, different approaches, right, to problem solving, clear course requirements, feedback to improve, grades updated regularly, right, for grading practices, and then instructor demeanor. Are they approachable out of class? Do they show sensitivity and respect and understanding with difficult subject matter? and works with students who have interferences. So what you see here this is a breakdown of each instructor who participated in Aspen, the number of sections, the courses they taught are right here, the number of sections they surveyed, the number of responses, and then we scored the surveys to give an overall score on this. 4 is the highest, right? You can see, so like all of the students were rating these classes pretty highly, right? So 3.8, 3.8, right? So doing better in terms of providing an equity-focused environment as outlined by Hughes. And then if you break it down in terms of the survey domain, so the classroom environment, the grading practices, and instructor demeanor, there's a little bit of variation there across the instructors, but overall what you can see is they're still relatively high. Oh, can you?
Your timer?
Yeah, it's my timer. I'm almost done. Okay, so some variation there, and then this is probably what you're most interested in, which is the post-Aspen success rates. So what we did, not all instructors taught Math 130, and not all of them taught it pre and post-Aspen. So what we tried to do, this is a smaller subset. These are all the pre-post Math 130 Aspen. So this was the success rate pre-Aspen. This is the post-Aspen, and you can see overall for the group, it increased substantially. And then you can see kind of the percentage point change. So it is a small group, right, but it shows promise. And then we did it for those who did not necessarily teach Math 130. We did it again here. So you can see most instructors had an increase. Like it was not as dramatic, and it's a different courses, right? So it's not apples to apples. So the key takeaways here is that there are changes towards more equity-minded syllabi, right, post-Aspen. And students of Aspen faculty report perceptions of equitable classroom environments, and the course success rates, particularly in Math 130, increased. Okay, so this is the summary. I won't go into it again. So essentially, broad policy objectives are accomplished. The co-requisite model of instruction seems to be more effective than the previous models. We've identified institutional barriers, right, to completion, and programs such as Aspen, we've implemented them and evaluated them, and they do show a lot of promise. And then this is just briefly some of the tools that we've done, as I mentioned, to put the data in the hands of faculty anytime. So we have assistance with identifying courses with lower success rates. So we have 3 dashboards that take that into consideration. So you can look at course enrollment and success rate, historical rates and trends with disaggregation by various demographic characteristics. You can look at just overall course success rates and then look at drill in by section. We have the opposite of that, which is high DFW. So if you really want to go and see the classes that students are having trouble with, you go to that one because you can see that one first. We have our section level success rates, course and instructor success rates, and course and instructor success disaggregated by race and ethnicity, right, so that they can see that. And then we also have, for student learning outcomes, we have outcomes reporting and outcomes tracking. This allows faculty, for example, to drill into Math 130 and see which outcomes, if any, students have more trouble with. So it's sort of an indicator of which concepts students are having a little bit more trouble with in that particular course. And that's it. Sorry, I went over.
Questions from my colleagues? Trustee Lilly?
Can we, let's see if you can go back to that slide. I think it's the Aspen one. I guess my question to you, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but did I read that right? Okay, so those were pre, right?
Which one? Oh, you want the success rates?
The success rate. Okay, those were pre, the success rate is...
There you go.
So that means only 4 instructors participated, 2, 4?
Only these 4 taught Math 130 pre and post,
Oh, okay.
but not 4 instructors.
Oh, okay, got it. And so if we're seeing success in this, in the Aspen, why aren't we doing more of it? I don't know who can answer that question.
It was a year grant,
Uh-huh.
and that year
years.
Just over.
It also was restricted to only quantitative reasoning mathematics faculty. So that's the Math 150, the Finance 101, and the Math 130 instructors. So it wasn't really opened up to all STEM instructors, it was targeted to that population. And we ran 2 cohorts and kind of stuff.
We ran 2 cohorts, so what you're seeing here is only 1 cohort. Because the second cohort, we don't have all the data yet to run it.
But if it's, I mean, if these are strategies that you're using, right, that are working. So I'm just saying, like, I know that it ran out, you know, like but I guess why aren't we doing more of the same thing?
I think
Right.
that'd be great, right?
Yeah, we just need to funding.
And we'd like to open it up to more of the math faculty and maybe science faculty as well.
Yeah, so they facilitated, and I was one of the participants.
Oh, okay, great.
So they were paid to design it, they were paid to facilitate it, and then we got stipends for participating. And it was a significant amount of reading and work during the semester.
Right.
It wasn't when we were, I know everybody has different opinions, but it's a lot when you're teaching and working and then also doing this full-on, whole semester PE, you know, it's a lot.
Right.
What?
So it wasn't that bad.
No, it is. It's not that it was bad, it was.
And I know you guys are
one and done.
doing such a great job with it, so it just seems like, I mean, it's something that we should look at and see, right? That maybe, I mean, I don't know how we can, I mean, I'm just looking at some of the success rates, even with I think the previous, like, when you first talked about math, the success rates, and I'm like, okay, what are those instructors doing, the ones that are having really high success rate? What are they doing? And why aren't they, or I don't know if they are, but why aren't they collaborating with those who are not having the high success rates? Like, why aren't we collaborating, I guess that's or are they?
We are,
You know?
we're gonna be presenting at the end,
Okay,
or what
perfect.
we're trying to do.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And thank you for all, I know it's, I mean, being in education, it's a lot of work, and especially math, and we're seeing statewide, I think, even in the K-12s, that, you know, that's a difficulty, right? The success rate or even in the state test, you know, it's a lot lower, but I think what we do, I mean, and this is just as a side note, as an educator myself, but what we do in the classroom is really important so that we can see those gains, and so. It's just a comment. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all the work. Just for clarification purposes, and you may not have the answer, so is it 2 cohort and we're done with the funding?
I believe the funding is completed. It was, as you recall, I think it was like
65.
Yeah, and so we ran 2 cohorts, right? And so Sarah and I are waiting for data for cohort 2 so we can run that data to add it to this and reevaluate to them.
My question then is, was there a limit on the amount of participants each cohort? Based on the funding?
Oh, I guess based on the funding, but we didn't max that out.
We didn't max that out, that's why we ran more than 2 cohorts.
So more than
one.
More than one, I'm sorry. We ran 2.
We ran
two. That I'm aware of.
Yes, that's all.
I think she was just focusing on certain classes so that she could evaluate the impact, right?
So the
That's
way
why
that-
it was quantitative reasoning.
Yes, the way that it was designed was originally just for Math 130.
Right.
And so we opened it up a little more broadly when we didn't get as many folks from Math 130 that we wanted.
Got it.
So we opened it up to anyone who was teaching 150, 130, Finance 101, and I think psychology, right? So, but we didn't get anyone from psychology. But the way that it was designed was that the first semester was all knowledge acquisition, right? So faculty participated, they went through all of the information. A lot of it was from USCQs related to how to make your classes more open, welcoming, create your syllabi with the student in mind rather than the institutional focus. So that whole semester was knowledge acquisition, and then semester 2 was designed as implementation. So we want you to redo your syllabus and turn that in, right, as part of your project. We want you to do this class climate study. Originally, it was they could do the climate study or they could do a voluntary teaching observation, but most people wanted to do the climate survey. Yeah, the pandemic, yeah. So that was part of it too, was during the pandemic.
My follow-up question is, when are we expected to complete the second cohort and the analysis?
The second cohort has completed, and it's just time after the course to get that post grade.
The grade, the post-Aspen grades.
Yeah.
That's what we're waiting for. We should have it, like, I think,
This semester.
this semester, end of spring, spring 23, yeah.
Another follow-up question. Given this success rate, what percentage do you anticipate, well, here's some, regardless of this, the second cohort success rate, would be able to present an overall analysis, whether it's the foundation and or the Aspen or any other foundation that would be interested in tackling the success rate when it comes to math.
So I'm not sure if I understand the question. So you're asking if we can take the results from Aspen and kind of use that to move forward?
Yes, I'm asking in terms of like presentation, like given your role in institutional analysis of our what we were doing here. Do you anticipate a model that can be presented, or just an example of what we can do when it comes to the leading and indicators, the light indicators of math?
So going back to the application and the work that we did to get the grant, they asked for like the leading and the lagging indicators. Certainly, so like we can go back and take a look at all of that information that we put together, look at this and see what we can come up with for a presentation to another audience, if you like.
Yes, I do. I personally.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you for all the work.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Trustee Santana?
So we'll go in order for my question. So in the access, you said that there was an increase in, there was an increase in among all ethnic and racial groups in access. But why was it so low before among all the groups? Was it that we didn't have offering of sections before?
So before 8705 implementation, we had the model of instruction that Van and Alice were talking about. So if you didn't test into transfer level, you got in this pipeline of below transfer level classes. And so
across the
it's
board,
like you
everybody
can
was
constrict the funnel.
as well.
Yeah, you constrict that funnel, and then when you constrict the funnel on the front end, you get very few on the back end actually finishing. So that's part of the rationale and policy objectives for 705, to get rid of that.
And then on the data didn't have spring, did you just combine fall and spring in the data? Or?
So some of the data is fall semester, some of the data is academic year, right? And then some of it's just like one term.
But the one that was just the fall, there was the...
Do you recall which?
It was in the first ones when you were showing them. Because I did see that there was a notation on one of them that it was a full year.
Right, so, okay, so like some of the PPIC stuff, we just chose the fall because we were replicating the PPIC study and that's what they chose.
Okay. And then do students with the SP, I put it just like that, do well or just as well as the ones that don't take it?
So I have to go back and look at what we've done on that. I think we might have differentiated in one of the, probably in the first or second study we did in the local context. The one that Jim did and the first one that Connie did, we did look at that, but I don't have it off the top of my head. So if you would like me to get that for you, I'm happy to get that for you.
And then there was a data that was where you showed the range of passing. The one was 0 in the math. So that one whole course, one whole section did not. What happened?
Yeah.
How many students were in that class too?
Yeah, that still has 0%.
Yeah, it still have 0%.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that's, I mean, so I hope those things like that, like, don't just pop out of, obviously they don't. No, but it's like, what happened?
It
What
popped out
happened?
to all of us and to the math faculty
And
especially.
you know, when we presented that at the Senate, it was the same type of
And
reaction.
it's like, so, I know, but then, I mean, and that's not my purview to get in the weeds of like, who? Like, what happened? Because it could be pandemic, right? It was just happen to be low enrollment, like whatever, it could be the same instructors having the same pattern. I mean, that's where I turn to the administration to see like what's happening like in the classroom of that individual instructor. I hope that that's where the next questions lead that we can ask.
I think part of it is with the new data sets, tools that Dr. Bell presented, we're now empowering the departments to look at their data and have these conversations. Looking at holistically, if they say, okay, look, we have one here that has 0%, what does that mean? How can we do more appreciative inquiry and have conversations about it so that they have access directly to the data so they can talk amongst themselves as a department what's happening here versus it being more of a punitive type of model. And so that's kind of where we're at by having all of these dashboards, which I think is a really good way to start those conversations.
But
we are asking. It is in their face. They're looking at it. It's popping up.
I know, but is there an answer to it? Does someone actually look at that class and say what happened? See what happened? We don't. So you know what happened.
Yes.
Okay, then that's all. I just want to make sure that somebody knows what happened. That it's not just a big fat zero there that we're okay with it. So okay. So.
And I will say that both Alice, Van, and Lisa, and I would say Adam are some of our most heaviest dashboard users, right? So we get regular questions from Alice, Van, Lisa, and Adam, like weekly, about the dashboards. Like, so they look at their data, whether it's the success data or the FTES data, all of that, they're looking at it, so.
And I appreciate that you guys are here to discuss what happened in the Aspen side. I think that's the next part of it. But I am curious to see if there's a way where we can, so it's not as burdensome in the middle of a semester. Because obviously, there's something in it that's working because we don't really require like training on pedagogy. So there's something there that's giving that you guys provided that gave them techniques to be stronger in getting the curriculum across and seeing higher success. So if there's a possibility to shorten it or make it instead of being one semester, just
It was actually a year.
Yeah, cut it up into like where the whole math department, the whole English department can benefit from those strategies, so that they can, even if they're good instructors already, it just strengthens or best practices, right? Talking about best practices, like when you're looking at the resume, like these things. Look, everybody, bring your resume. I'm an HR manager. That's your syllabus. Your syllabi, and look at them and say like where, like rating themselves as far as how what the best practices were that showed up, because I think we've been briefed on that before on the syllabi and the review of it, the blind review, and I think that was a little surprising, but a little time. But I think it also went to philosophy, right? It demonstrates whether the instructor's more or less forgiving when it comes to personal, issues, attendance, and the student knows, okay, I'm not going to be able to make anything up or whatever it is. It's just having that transparency in the classroom, which I think is what the students are responding to. So, but I do agree with my colleagues that we can't let it die. We can't let it die with. We obviously, there was some gains for our students, most importantly, and so somehow we can institutionalize it and make it something ongoing that gets, that we can touch more.
Okay, so can I do a time check?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at about 8:10, and the English, the show, the main presenter of the show are next. They each have 20 minutes, so that's going to put us at like 8:40-ish. We're just kind of doing a time check so that if we have questions in between, that we don't, that we get them all answered, but that we give them enough time to give us their presentations. So, okay.
All right. So I'm going to talk about the past and the present with the English department, and Angela very much has her eye on the future. So let me take you to the past and the lead up to implementation for AB 705. Concurrently at that time, faculty, we were developing workshops. We had a workshop blitz. We had 24 presentations on 10 different workshops. These were hosted by full-time faculty to primarily help with adjunct faculty get on board with what we were doing and what we would be doing with AB 705. But even to that end, some of these topics we still discuss in our professional development sessions, things like curriculum challenges, best practices, motivating students. This is what we do time and time again. Along with that, we were developing 10S and 10SP, as Dr. Meekum was talking about. Myself and other colleagues, we attended CAP and presentations by the RP group. And as we had mentioned earlier, the initial plan was to just develop a 4.5 unit and a 5.5 unit class. However, that presented certain articulation challenges. So that is why we went with the support course, which is what, just based on my own experiences at CAP, that's what most colleges were doing. So we went with that. At the same time, we were having a lot of conversations about SLOs and how we assessed our courses and our outcomes. So previously we used solutions and everyone was just kind of doing their own thing, and there was a wide range of issues with that. We never saw anything come out of that. The phrase that often popped up was the outcomes went into a void and we just never saw anything after that. However, as we started to get data from institutional effectiveness, we started to see, okay, there may be some problems here. And once Task Stream rolled out, then we really started to have robust conversations on how do we assess English 101, how do we assess English 201, along with our literature courses. So with the help of Dr. Durdella, and especially with Sarah Cote, we developed a new outcomes assessment pilot. I do have to apologize to Dr. Durdella for, I was in Senate mode thinking of Coolio with IEC, institutional effectiveness. So now how we assess English, the outcomes assessment pilot for English 101, how it works now is it is a much more holistic approach. Random faculty are requested to submit student papers. Student information is then redacted, and faculty who are not being assessed, they then read the papers and they assess the outcomes now. So this provided us with some interesting data. For one, it engaged us with the data. It was no longer going into a void. We had a greater awareness of what was happening, and it provided us with a greater awareness of what each instructor was doing in their classrooms. This was a tacit lesson in pedagogy and instructional design. We got to see, okay, you're doing this kind of assignment in your class, this kind of assignment in your class. This is fantastic. However, there were still discrepancies, which is what led to the course revision of English 101. I, being a glutton for punishment, decided to spearhead the composition task force, which revised English 101. This was a complete overhaul of the course. Typically, when courses are updated, we make adjustments to textbooks or we change some language. This was a year-long process. This was not just one meeting. And how it began was we actually looked at course outline of records for equivalent English 101s at our local sister community colleges. We looked at Cerritos, we looked at Cypress, LBCC, Saddleback. We also looked at some of the CSUs, CSU-LA, as well as Cal State Long Beach. And we started to have really productive discussions about what we want English 101 to do and what we want that class to be and what students should be getting out of it. So the major revisions to English 101, the first major revision is a greater emphasis on research. The reason for this is because some of the outcomes for English 101 deal specifically with the integration and implementation of research, along with MLA formatting and text citations. And it seemed problematic that for some instructors, they would introduce the research component towards the end of the semester. So then it's like, okay, well, how are we assessing this when it's only introduced towards the end? Let's integrate it throughout the semester. So that was one of the major changes, is a greater emphasis on research, teaching those fundamentals and those techniques throughout the semester. Along with that, if we're going to have a greater emphasis on research, we need a greater emphasis on reading skills. So the previous course outline and record had little, if any, mention of reading skills. This was an entirely new section that we actually added to the course outline of record, with the emphasis on evidence, analysis, fact-based and opinion-based writing. And happening alongside the composition task force, we had a separate task force looking at our writing workshop. So the writing workshop task force, what they ultimately produced was then integrated into the English 101 course outline revision. The old COR had very vague language on what to do during that lab time. And again, we were thinking about our part-time faculty, giving them better ideas of how to utilize that time. And this way, everyone has a greater understanding of what to do during this time. However, if we're going to revise English 101, we also need to revise English 201. And this has actually just completed. It will be going through the curriculum process. Now the exiting skills of English 101 line up with the entering skills of English 201. And how we look at English 201 is not a repetition of 101. This is supposed to be mastery of the skills. So the skills are introduced in English 101. They are further developed and refined in English 201, along with an introduction to scholarly research. And this was still a part of that same task force. The task force's work is done. However, I have had several faculty members who were on that panel say they actually miss being on that task force. And I don't know how often you hear faculty saying they miss being on the task force, but I think it spoke to an innate desire for faculty to talk amongst each other, amongst their peers, and say, okay, what are you doing in your class? What are you doing in your class? And having a chance to actually talk shop. And they were extraordinarily productive conversations. Dr. Rhodes was a part of it, along with Marie Ekstrom, Tom Callanan, Teresa Frigi. It was fantastic work. So that was the past, present, but still kind of going into the future. So with that, we turn to the future.
Thank you. So this idea of faculty collaborating with one another, the driving force behind that was so strong that our coordinator, Marie Ekstrom, put together a colloquium, and Alice Meekum got her funding to fund this, to say to our full-timers and our part-timers, if you want to come, if you want to participate in this, let's talk about ChatGPT, approaches to how do we solicit discussion in the classroom. Let's talk about close reading, incorporation of evidence, connecting ideas. How do you do rubrics? Talking about outlines, so multiple aspects of how courses are taught. And this just took place on Friday. And so, although we don't have Aspen, we're not eligible for Aspen, we created a very scaled down version that allowed us to come together and really talk shop, as Coker says. So some goals that we have. We would really like to continue the assessment pilot. We went from individual scoring of how our students are doing to a very holistic, meaningful scoring, because it's blind. You know, when you scored your own papers, oh, I know they meant to do that, or I know them, they really did better, or oh no, what were they thinking? So when you grade your own papers, you're biased, but when it's a blind assessment. It's much more real. And I will share with you that we were very astounded by our numbers when we did the real assessment. And it was much different than what we had been gathering before. And so we would like to continue to monitor English 101 because what we really did with these task forces is we removed that barrier of the research paper from English 101. Through our research and discussion, we learned that other colleges don't require a formal research paper in English 101. They have it in English 201. And that was something that we have been talking about for years. I've been here for 20, and it's been years that we see this research paper as a barrier, but we thought, well, everybody else has it. If we want it to articulate, we have to keep it. So we did the research, and it's not true. So we removed the actual paper, the research paper, and really focused on research techniques. So the beginning stages of research, and then put the actual paper in 201. And this, we believe, will yield amazing results. It's to be determined. We don't have the statistics yet. We have a wonderful Gateway Tutor program. And a Gateway Tutor is a tutor that is embedded in the classroom with the students and the teacher. And very often what we see is that students feel a lot more comfortable asking questions of a peer than the instructor. And so, you'll see our Gateway Tutors hanging out in the LAC or in the hallway where there are benches, and they're chatting about classes, and so they're aiding instruction. And so we would love to see a major expansion of that Gateway Tutor program. We also plan to hold syllabi review groups, so we can have those difficult conversations. It takes a lot of vulnerability to share your syllabus with your colleagues, because what are you doing? You're asking them to scrutinize and judge you. And so it takes a lot of vulnerability, but that's something that we would really like to do. We would absolutely love to align the success rates for all modalities. We need a lot of professional development in this area because our asynchronous classes, the students are not as successful as on-ground students. And so we would like to see those success rates aligned. But again, we need help with that. No teacher comes out of the womb knowing how to do all of these things. We need support and help. We would love to expand our OER, online educational resources. These are zero textbook our classes. We'd like to see our faculty create their own instructional materials that are at a zero cost or low cost to students. Our students have been very loud advocates of this. And I know it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to create a textbook. Myself, Dr. Okamoto, and Gina Bowe, who is an amazing part-timer, we put a book together for English 101, and it's been over a year that we've worked on it, and it's a lot of work. But it's what our students are asking for, so it's very important that we produce that. This is something new in our department, that we really want to focus on personal connections with students. For those of us who have been in education before, we have seen the mindset shift where even 10 years ago, we have students and the mindset was, you have a right to fail. Well, now it's you have a right to succeed and be amazing and let us help you with that. And so slowly and surely, our faculty colleagues are coming on board with that. And we do see evidence of that when many faculty members in the English department partnered with our student success coach, Raquel Flores-Olson. And what she did was she came into the classrooms, or she made a little video for those of us who teach asynchronously. And she introduced herself, and she made sure that students have an ed plan and that they have a major. So they're not just taking random classes and wasting time. They have a very set plan for their future. Also, faculty members are walking their students to the Learning Resource Center during lab. And when you have a warm handoff like that, it's a lot more meaningful. And so those are just some examples, but we would definitely like to develop those personal connections with our students. We would also love to have a best practices Canvas shell. I believe, gosh, this was pre-pandemic, I think it was 2018. One of our faculty members started this project, and then the pandemic happened, and well, we all know what happens when the pandemic happened. Everything just kind of stops. So we'd like to get back to that. And we do also have our eye on our literature courses, to rework and reword our literature courses so that they're uniform and students know exactly what they're expected to do when they enroll in a literature course. And to do all of these things, we need extensive professional development. We need help to do these things. So.
Thank you. Any colleagues have any questions?
I do have a quick question. What did you mean by the real assessment?
The real assessment. Oh, so before, in the before times, each individual instructor would assess their own students and determine were they proficient or not proficient. And then the real assessment is the blind assessment, where you don't know whose paper you're reading. The students' names are redacted and the instructors' names are redacted. So it truly is blind.
Do you think that's why the numbers went down?
I don't think so. I think, as I understand it, students are having a bit of a difficult time coming back on campus. We see students who are having difficulty socializing, speaking up in class, asking questions. And so I think that as we return to pre-pandemic times, that things will get better. Also, English is a writing. Writing is a skill that takes a lot of practice. And it's not, and no offense to my math colleagues, but it's not the memorization of a formula and then you know the answer all the time. So it's quite nuanced. And so I think that, there are multiple elements to that, but I feel very strongly that if we have some professional development, that those incremental changes can happen in a really meaningful way. Thank you for the question.
Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Great. I apologize, I'm not usually presenting at this time of night. Okay. Van on this slide. But what I want, instead of reading all of these things, in addition to this, going back even more from, I think his presentation started in 2012, is that a lot of us have been involved in these things where it's been, for the math department, it's been change after change after change, like redo these courses, try this new. I was key in developing the pre-statistics class. So much time went into developing that, the common activities, the professional development. That class is just gone. So all of that work. So just putting a little lens on all of this, I think we're tired. It has been like one thing after another, and the pandemic, and we're trying to help students who did high school math online. And they didn't take algebra here and intermediate algebra here. And I have them in my trig class, and they can't do a lot of the things that a couple years ago they would have been able to do, having placed into it with the placement test and having had regular classes in person in high school. So it is challenging. The actual teaching is challenging. And then we're being asked to do this like wave after wave. And like, I mean, to tell you the truth, like it's like, you just want to be like, I'm done. I just wanted to teach my students, you know, but it's just wave after wave. So I just want to put context that we have been trying very hard. There are a lot of instructors, there are a lot of sections, there's a lot of variation, but just know that our hearts have been there. We've been trying our best. And when we had to do the E-courses, we had to do it, E is our co-requisite for math. We just call them E as essential topics for each one. And we had to do it for 5 classes, all at once, right? We have common things in all of the outlines where we have study skills, time management. We have an emphasis on the affective domain. So we do address, most of us, we have shared Canvas discussions where they watch TED Talks about mindset and grit and learning from failure, how our brains learn. And the students really respond to those things. It really gives them hope, where sometimes at the beginning they're like, I don't know if I can pass this class, and then, you know, just telling, no, you can do it, and all of that. So part of, like, for me, my co-rec is, a lot of it is that. They're just trying to convince them that they're capable of doing it. We developed OER materials for 2 of our main courses, Math 130 and Math 150. And then we also went through our Math 130, our statistics class, and better aligned it with the state CID. We were covering topics that are not on there, so we're like, why are we covering these things? So we took a few things off that were not on the state level one to just at least reduce the topics a little bit. When we got that original data that showed the wide variation, originally the lowest was, I think, 9.6 for the first round. Yeah. And I do think that that 0 is an anomaly. I think it was our first semester coming back onto campus, and I think some sections that were super low enrolled. You know, you have a small class and people stopped coming for whatever reason. People were still getting sick. A lot of things going on. I do think that 0 was an anomaly. I don't think we have any other zeros. Have we ever had any other zeros? I don't know.
No other zeros.
No other zeros, right? But since we're showing the max and the min, and that was 21, 22, I believe. So it was literally like, as students were coming back, I don't know who it was. I don't know what happened there. But I know there was some super low enrolled courses, like 10 people in a course, right? And if it's an in-person class, just to address that 0, it was an anomaly. It is not a common math success rate. But we looked at it when we saw that original spread, and during the pandemic, we formed a work group where a bunch of us that were teaching stats got together and was like, okay, what could cause such a large variation? As Dr. DeVilla said, course policies, right? If one person accepts late work but somebody else doesn't, obviously that has an effect. If somebody, you know, replaces a lowest exam or drops a lowest exam, that's going to have an effect. So we got together, well actually we first created an anonymous survey. Jim Sass helped us do it from IRP so that people could be open and free about what their policies are. So we collected all of the policies, and then we looked at grading categories and weights and makeup, essentially makeup work. And once we got all that information, I know it's a little hard to read, we're like, well, let's try something. So we have our math department Canvas shell. We have a module for each class where we share the course outline, and pacing, and syllabi, so that part-timers can see it. And we had created a course policies document specifically for stats, because that was where all the lens was. And we did recommending grade categories and weights. Recommended technology, because some people were using calculators, some were not, you know, like having some streamlined technology. Recommended late policies with examples, recommending, and a lot of faculty who weren't really open to doing late work before because it was the pandemic. I think people were a little more open to accepting late work. And with examples, also recommended having a formal review before a test, where you go through the topics in person. Recommended, all of these things are recommendations, right? Recommended allowing use of notes, like allowing students to bring a page of formula or notes for exams. And then we also created common outcomes quizzes in Canvas, so that you could just drop them into your Canvas class and have the students take a similar quiz to assess outcomes. And then, like I said before, we revised the content in our Math 130. We streamlined it a bit. And Aspen has already been addressed quite a bit with Dr. Dudella, and we'll soon just get into the slides.
I think we already talked a lot, so we would like to move on. So you can say, yeah, everybody wanna probably get out soon. So, well, we talked Aspen, so we did the 2 cohorts, 2021, and we had a 2022, then we finished a 1-year program. And I would like to say yes, I think we did really great outcomes as a result. Okay. So next slide, you will see our 3 years for the math goal, our department goals. But what we really want to try to do is clearly increasing your success rates. And you can see we have a really wide range for the success rate, so which is standard deviation we want to decrease. So probably we need to explore more the way to make our classes more uniform. That's pretty much our target. And as you see, it's AB75 came, and now it's AB1705 is coming. So it's our goal. It's just moving. It's never where's our goal post. We will see the next couple of years, see what's really going to happen.
So that's me. Yeah. With AB 1705, they are now focusing on trig and pre-calc, and there has been the suggestion that those will be removed, which takes out some of the foundational skills that our students need for calculus. So part of our goals are including trying to preempt that. So one of the things is we want to, we really prioritize, we have several goals, but these are the ones that are priorities over the next 3 years, to evaluate and organize our current eco-requisite support courses, which we put together all at once, those 5, and make them a little bit more uniformly executed in the department, making sure we prioritize our co-recs for stats and the Math 150 for our non-STEMs, because those are the most highly populated courses. And then we need to create a support structure for incoming and continuing STEM students, especially with the advent of the 1705 suggestions. So now we're going to implement an e-course, which will be a co-rec support for our Calc 1, which does not exist yet, and for our Math 170, which is our elements of calculus for our business majors. If they do take away trig and pre-calc, they will be coming straight into those courses. And some will benefit from the co-requisite support. Using similar design strategies where we came up with the current eco-rec support courses, and we also want to look at, we've heard of some intervention and lab support systems that are out there, and we want to start investigating what they're doing and how that's working so that we can maybe implement similar strategies to offer that support. So that goalpost, we're trying to move before it moves so that our students can be successful if those things are eliminated, which we're a little bit worried about. So as Angela said, we need support.
We as a department have been constantly in development, but we don't have any course coordinators on release time at all. Though we have so many courses that have had to be revised over the last 5 years. We do have 2 faculty on release time, but they are for specific assignments, MESA and LASE. We have requested that we can get a task force together to start that Calc 1 support. So far, funding is difficult to find, and so we're asking that the board be prepared for that request when it comes, because we need time. We need time, our faculty needs time to develop these courses and come up with the materials and do the research and everything that's required, along with our full loads of teaching. So it'd be nice if somebody didn't have a full load of teaching and was able to really dedicate that time to develop those. So we definitely want to ask for your support. Yeah, and that's what that says. Sorry, ma'am, people were short to the point. That's it. Any questions?
Questions for me? Yes.
Just so that before the Q&A, just so you know, the next steps is we will be asking for the math and English faculty, working with their deans, to propose 3-year plans. So the 3-year plans, this is kind of why I want this conversation. We'll focus on the goals that they have established, the activities, how are they going to measure it, and then what a measurable outcome, and then what funding do they need. And so those will be coming forward. We'll be reviewing them, kind of going back and forth, because the task at hand is that I present to the Board of Trustees a 3-year plan to help assist with AB 705, 1705 implementation. So I'm hoping that the questions that the board's asking, that you're kind of grinding them in your mind as well, and thinking about how we can embed those types of activities. And so one question that I have that if you can clarify for us is, we've been talking about Aspen, but can you share how many were in cohort 1 and how many were in cohort 2? And then number 2 question is, correct me if I'm wrong, was Aspen supposed to be training the trainers models? And if that's the case, my question number 3 would be, could we create a localized Aspen through those that have been trained to address some of the barriers that you talked about? Somebody suggested not making it so long. Could we create like our own Aspen and call it something else that is better in the essence of some of the barriers that you found?
I cannot remember the exact numbers. I want to say we had 9 in the first one and maybe 5. It was very small populations in both of them.
So 14.
Yeah. So yeah, those small.
How many in the math department?
21 in the math. But this also, one of the instructors was a Finance 101 instructor. And we didn't have any site staff instructors, but it could have been that.
21 math, I think you said 9 and 5, so 14.
No, she said how many are in the
faculty? Oh, I'm sorry.
There's 21 total, but there's only about 9 that were included, and not all were math faculty. We developed a shell.
Because I was trained, not the Rio Hondo, but I was trained by another institution. So I had a little idea, I have a little trend. So we made it together for the one shell for the Aspen.
So that is something that can be replicated. It wasn't a train-the-trainer, Carolyn?
No,
I don't think so.
it wasn't designed as train-the-trainer.
No, because that's not the strategies that we were asked to do. So it was just us training, and as trainers, we're not the experts. We're actually learning along with our colleague, right? We might be 3 steps ahead, right? But so it was a collaborative, but we did have materials from the, what was this?
Q's.
Yes, thanks. Q's, all of their materials, plus there's some that are specifically targeting STEM, culturally responsive pedagogy in STEM courses, and so we use a lot of we just did a lot of adaptation. But that is contained in a shell currently. That is something that we could use it again, for sure.
There's a lot of readings and videos, and then replying in discussions.
And then the development of not only the cultural survey and the syllabi, we also they had to come up with an activity, a class activity, an implementable activity that is collaborative, equitable,
those types, met those things, and so it was not, the K-12, you know what a lesson plan looks like. College professors have not all seen that form, right? So we taught them how to do a formal lesson plan and have the SWBATs and all that stuff, right? So, yeah, that was kind of fun, but they had to develop a formal lesson plan, which was nice, and it had to meet those requirements as well.
I forget what part 3 was of your question.
Oh, that was just.
If it was train the trainer.
Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
so it's contingent on question 2.
And or if you could create a personal, but you just said you could do campus and.
It already, yeah, it's created, and we can.
It's a shell there, but I think having the facilitators
and that's
lead you through and guide you, you're not just like doing it on your own. And
The
you have your
discussion
group.
was a very powerful piece, for sure.
Yeah.
Do I have any other questions? Jessica,
I don't have questions, I have 2 comments. One, thank you for this work that you all have been doing, both on the front line and the administrative aspect. I want you to know that I believe it's real hard work, what you've been doing and you're working on. I also believe that those are some of the foundations that our students should have when we get them or when they arrive at the college. But I also recognize that 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago, I was the unconventional student, an English learner, etc. So I did take remedial English, not math, I was pretty good at math. So. And just relating and just thinking, just about a month ago, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so I get to see this math and English writing skills. And my daughter recently wrote an essay about Lord of the Flies, right? 7th grade. But as we were discussing it, both grammar and whatever, we also had the opportunity to think about really the concepts that we were really understanding. But reflecting about, like, although my parents fully supported my educational, not support, demanded that I get an education, they had 2nd grade level education from a third world country. That was in a war for 40 years. So I also want to recognize that we may not have, or we may have a lot of Oscars, right? So I personally thank you for the work that you're all doing, because it's hard work, obviously as an individual, but I think I can speak for the entire board, really support this kind of work, and I think this is why we get involved, and we may not always agree on a lot of things, but something that we all agree is that we're here because we really care about our community, and because we know that education is transformational, because I don't think any of us will be here if it wasn't for that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Santana?
So when Dr. Rose was talking, she said that, which, stood out to me, that people have a right, that the mindset has been changing, that our students have a right to succeed, not a right to fail. And so I know math, we've struggled with math, it's been, I still remember the 6% when the average was pretty much 6% of pass rate. And that was pretty, that was pretty, very low. So has that mindset, have you guys had that aha moment as you're going through these, looking at these numbers and, really, trying to show, or I'm struggling with this, sorry. So it's really like putting yourselves in the student's position. Like, I'm not going to accuse anybody. I just remember I had a high school teacher who took pride in reducing his class size by the end, and so to me that's, not, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, so please don't take it that way. But I know that there's those mindsets because it becomes more manageable as an instructor, as a faculty member. But so I guess I hope, and I don't, you don't have to answer the question, but I hope that as we're asking for more, there's that understanding of why, right? It's like, because, the Oscars of the world, like, they come, not to use it, but, there's, we're not all handed with, perfect educational backgrounds, and even when they are, it's, students struggle in their own individual ways.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that the other side of the coin is there's success and there's retention, right? Like, if a whole bunch of students drop before the W deadline, and it's down, and then they get, it's like they go hand in hand. Some of us might keep all of our students, right? And then we have them till the end, and it goes down. So it's like those two things go hand in hand. And I think most of us are. And when you look at that spread, nobody talks about those 80%. Nobody's talking about the people on the top. No, I know. I'm just saying, like, and I think a lot of the math faculty feel very attacked. And it's not just the people with the lower, people with the higher feel defensive, like, oh, that they're too, it's like, so there's, I think people have felt attacked. I think what we did at Flex Day with the positive inquiry, appreciative inquiry, was one of the best conversations we've had in a long time, because we focused on the good. And when we focused on the good, we were able to have good conversations. It's a huge group, we're a huge department, and it went really, really well. Everybody was like, I don't think anything negative was really even said. So I just want to say, like, we've all been thinking about it. There's been a lot of focus on our numbers. So every single one of us is thinking about it. We're all different people. Like, we can't speak for everybody, but as a department, we've definitely been discussing this for years.
Well, and I appreciate the
Sorry,
honesty.
and then she was
Statistically, our throughput has increased, right? And we have that and we've seen that. So that 6% is no longer even a number that we're talking about. We're now have, the growth is, well, we saw it in green, yellow, and blue, right? So
it's out the door now.
yeah, it's really good. So we want to focus on that growth and improve that growth instead of focusing on what was way back when. Yes, we're aware, like she said, but we have implemented so many strategies and things to collaborate that we're starting to see the benefit of that.
It'd be nice to get into a groove and actually be able to do something for a while.
Fast.
Mr. Russell?
Sure.
There's an attitude, not in math, not just in math, not just in science, but it permeates academia. And that is the gatekeeper attitude. And until we can do something about that, this is going to be a tough battle. So if anyone has suggestions about how to combat the gatekeeper attitude, I'd be very willing to listen and take to heart your words.
I don't have a solution. but what I was going to say is that I think part of it, there is also a new attitude shift towards understanding that the student is a student of many classes. If I have a student in my English 201 who is taking, Dr. Holbrook's class, and they have a test coming up, their anxiety for that is going to affect their performance in my class. But if I have, and luckily I do have this relationship with Dr. Holbrook, I can be like, hey Veronica, what's going on? How's so-and-so doing? Whatever. And I think having those interdepartmental and interdivisional, I'm an English professor, I'll make words. Those are key, because then we start to understand that they're not just a student in our class, they're a student here. Their success in one class is predicated on the success in another class. And then we also consider the outside of the college influence. Are they working? Are they doing inventory overnight at their jobs? Are they taking care of kids and stuff like that? That's absolutely crucial that we also consider those things as we are designing and talking about the very things that we are talking about.
And just to add to that a little bit, if it's okay. Okay, thank you. So within the last 5 to 7 years, I think faculty are finally getting the idea that these are humans, not just students. And humans come packaged with many aspects. And I think, there's a saying that everything is slow in education, right? It takes a lot to make even just incremental changes. But I feel like we're starting, and not starting, but we're on the road. And I feel like, there are 3 types of people, right? There are red lighters, where I'm not going to do it, you can't make me, it's not in my contract, right? And then we have the green light, who are like, yeah, I'll try that. That sounds amazing. I'm on it. I'll go to that professional development. Let's do that. And then you have the middle, which is where most people are, the yellow lighters. I'm not sure. I'll hang back. Let me see how everybody else is doing, and then maybe I'll jump on board. And so those yellow lighters are the ones that we really need to focus on, making these changes. And so the gatekeepers are the red lighters. They're not going to change. We have to wait until they retire. And then we can...
But, you know, you're
Just
talking...
being honest, right?
And we're talking about, in some ways, a cultural shift that needs to happen also on the part of students. Because they, through K through 12, they've encountered a lot of those red lighters. And as a consequence, what you see in instructional support, and some of us were talking about this earlier, is a lot of students presume that academic support means they are dumb. They hear the word tutoring and they go, that's not for me, that's not who I am. So we really need, through, I think, an ethics of care, to flip that whole culture. And I think it is happening.
Okay, so, yeah.
Just the other thing too is that, going back to the retirement thing, but
I'm just being honest.
one thing is that, and we're going to be working on this, is that our faculty evaluations is going to be something that we have to bargain, need to be improved on, so that we have peer input, more input from students. It's very interesting the way it's done here at Rio, and it's not, it could be more value added, and it could address some of these things. So we'll see what happens with that, but that's another area when it goes back to when we say, when you have somebody that has a 0, whether it's isolated or not, you'll be able to know that, but the only way that you know that is through these peer evaluations and discussions that allow for self-reflection, conversation, and so forth. So I'm hoping that we can evolve that. Of course, that's going to have to be bargained, but hopefully we can look at that as a more holistic approach and an opportunity for it to be not a punitive process, but a process where true collaboration and engagement can occur. So that's another area that potentially, and continue to have conversations from an appreciative inquiry perspective, continue to bring college-wide trainings that talk about discussion, because to your point, we're always going to have the red lighters, guys, like to call them. You're always going to have the red lighters, and no matter what we do, it's not going to. The only way we can really address those is going to be tentatively through evaluations, right? Or if we get a golden handshake or something. But to your point, yeah, you're right. We need to really, really focus on the yellows, right? We really need to put that attention.
Well, I just appreciate the honesty, and the numbers are just fantastic. I mean, they're wonderful. So they're stunting in the other way, right? The positive side. So I do appreciate it, and it's wonderful to have faculty here. So I appreciate that this was the setup, because we've never really had a study session, or we haven't had a study session like this in a very long time, but also with faculty who are actually in the classroom.
The green lighters.
So the green lighters.
They are the green lighters.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being honest. I mean, I think we have no choice right now. That the state is making us make a lot of these changes. So it's better that we move together versus we move in different directions. So thank you.
Trustee Montgomery?
Just want to say thank you to everyone again, and especially our faculty. I mean, it's very familiar. Your words that you're saying, I mean, I hear it, I see it, I live it every single day. So I'm with you, I understand, and I know that you're moving, the needle little by little, and I hear that you need a lot of training. So I think that's something that, professional development is very important. I think that once you start receiving that, and then you can become those trainers of trainers. I mean, if that's what you just said, I'm just kind of, but I think that's what, I think that's really important. And also, I mean, there's obviously, as you mentioned, there's some differences in, the K-12 versus the colleges, and that's the pedagogy, right? And that's the instructional piece and how you deliver also. I mean, we were taught to do it a certain way and how to, collaborate and, change your classroom, it should be, in a collaborative setting, right? And so there's a lot of things that I think that, you have to have the mindset, right? And especially in math, even our students, they're like, I can't do math, I don't like it. And I'm like, you don't like it yet, right? Or we've tried to change their way of thinking, and it's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of language in math, right? And so that's where our English learners are, I keep saying our Oscars over there, but, all of us, I think I was myself an English learner, so, but it's important that we do have those trainings on, because it's new to all of you, like I said, I work with them every single day. You're working with them every day as well. It's just how do we get them to be successful, right? And so I just want to say thank you very much to all of you for, as well, being honest and being here and, whatever, whatever we need to make sure that you're successful. I'm sure that, we can look for support.
On that note, we will end at, Dr. Flores just gave me the look, but okay, we have a couple more minutes.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'll just keep my
Yes,
comments
that's
brief.
okay.
I just really want to extend my appreciation for Trustees. I really do appreciate this conversation and just all of the work that went into this presentation to help us understand how you're moving forward and the steps that you're taking. I really do believe in the professional development that you've all spoken about and how that can really help our students. But to the point of the yellow group, like how do we encourage them to take that professional development and how is that incorporated into your 3-year plan? Because as we've seen with the Aspen Institute grant, we have these opportunities, but we didn't have the teachers taking it. So I think that's also an important thing to tackle when we're coming forward with this plan. But I'm really excited for everything that will happen and how it will affect our students and how we can all be such a welcoming space for our students to succeed. So with that,
You were in the lead right now. Okay, so I will echo everything that my colleague said. Most of my questions were answered, so thank you so much. It is 9:02. Thank you.